Chapter 76, The Shadow in the Pines. Late October 1987, Kukenu Mountain Range, Republic of Padokia. The autumn chill hit like a physical wall the second the transport airship's side hatch hissed open. High up in the Kukenu Range, dense fog clung to the ancient pine forests, weaving between jagged granite spires and treacherous ravines. Below lay the mountain pass, a crucial transit road currently silent, abandoned, and lined with rusted police barricades. I stepped off the airship's boarding ramp, pulling my heavy collar up against the biting wind. The airship's engines hummed, lifted off, and disappeared into the grey soup of clouds, leaving me in absolute silence. Well, almost absolute. Scouting the perimeter. I crouched behind a moss-covered boulder, immediately dropping my aura output into a total, flawless zetsu. My presence vanished instantly from the environment. To any creature relying on aura sensing or body heat, I was nothing more than a cold stone in the dirt. Environmental scan and scouting report. Location: Kukenu Pass. Weather: high fog, freezing wind, dropping visibility. Target species: shadow claw prowlers. Aura traits: rudimentary enhancement, high-speed instinctual shoe. Closing my eyes, I relied on my sharpened physical senses. The wind whistled through the pine needles. Half a mile up the slope, a sharp snap of a heavy twig echoed through the trees. I focused my eyes, activating a faint thread of gyo to enhance my vision through the thick mist. There, darting between the thick trunks, were three low, dark shadows. The shadow claw prowlers. They looked like a twisted hybrid between a panther and a dire wolf, 6-foot-long sleek torsos covered in dark gray fur, featuring long, bone-like spires protruding from their shoulders and sharp, obsidian claws. But what made him dangerous was the faint, unstable flicker of green aura wrapping around their forelegs and jaws. Rudimentary enhancement, I observed, watching them move with terrifying agility across the frozen terrain. They unconsciously apply shu to their claws to shred steel armor and rock faces. The nest location. Keeping my zetsu locked, I moved like a ghost through the tree line, leaping silently from branch to branch without shaking a single pine needle. Following the pack of three, I tracked him up a steep ridge toward an old, collapsed mining tunnel embedded into the face of a sheer granite cliff. The stench of iron, damp fur, and old decay drifted down the wind. Target territory: OLD Kukenu Mine. Entrance: single main shaft. Pack size: estimated 8 to 12 adults plus alpha leader. Combat strategy: confined space limits agility, ideal for bottleneck defense. Outside the entrance, two larger prowlers sat on guard duty, their ears twitching at every gust of wind. Inside the cave, I could feel the low, rhythmic vibration of multiple aura sources breathing in unison. A dozen of them, I muttered under my breath, perching on a high branch 50 yards away. This was my first official solo mission as a licensed hunter. No Kale to step in, no Jiang to laugh off mistakes. I reached inside my coat pocket, my fingers brushing against my blank card stock. I could use Oakhaven Aegis and grind him down in a long bottleneck fight at the cave entrance. Or I could test a customized Chronicle card to clear the nest efficiently. Chapter 77, The Isolated Laboratory. Kukenu Mountain Ridge, Deep Forest Sector. The dense mountain fog rolled over the pine canopy, shrouding the ravine in total gray isolation. I dropped down from the high branch onto a flat, frost-covered clearing 50 yards downwind from the mine shaft. I paused, closing my eyes to expand my aura perception in a wide, sweeping pulse of N. 200 yards, 300 yards. No human signatures. No association observers. No remote surveillance drones. Just the whistling wind, the distant dripping of water, and the low, guttural growls of the prowler pack echoing deep within the cavern. Safe, I muttered, opening my eyes. Time to work. Phase 1. Hybrid integration and sovereign thread. I reached into my coat, pulling out a single stark white card. My mind reached back into the memories of my apprenticeship under Kale, his immaculate black suit, his composed gentlemanly posture, and his true signature move, sovereign thread, black symphony. Kale's technique transmuted aura into jet black, razor-sharp monofilament threads, orchestrating them like a conductor leading a dark, lethal opera to slice, bind, and crush targets with absolute control. I fed that exact narrative and technical understanding into the blank vessel. Swoosh. The card dissolved, leaving behind a subtle, pitch-black aura humming around my forearms. Simultaneously, I deployed my public Hatsu, Oakhaven Aegis. Heavy, hexagonal braces snapped onto my wrists, projecting a translucent energy barrier in front of me. Hybrid test. Oakhaven Aegis plus sovereign thread. Barrier function, frontal kinetic defense and spatial locking. Imprint function, black monofilament aura threads. Combat test, automated defensive counter and thread entanglement. Growl. A massive, 8-foot alpha prowler burst from the tree line, its eyes glowing with feral aggression. It lunged through the fog, its obsidian claws wrapped in green enhancement aura, aimed straight for my throat. Boom! The beast slammed full force into Oakhaven's hexagonal shield. The kinetic shockwave scattered the surrounding frost, but my footing didn't yield an inch. The instant impact registered on the shield, the imprinted sovereign thread triggered. Dozens of pitch-black, razor-thin aura strands whipped out from the shield's edge, wrapping around the monster's limbs and throat like an invisible web. With a sharp flick of my wrist, the black threads constricted, instantly binding the 8-foot beast, severing its muscle movement, and pinning it helplessly against the frozen earth. Phase 2. Thomas's healing, wine to water. The alpha beast lay trembling in the dirt, its dark fur stained with blood where the sharp threads had dug in, its chest heaving as it neared death from internal shock. Not yet, I said softly, stepping closer. I pulled out a second blank card. This time, I reached into a different memory, the warmth of St. Jude's sanctuary, the smell of cheap stew, and Thomas's quiet, self-sacrificing nature. I recalled Thomas's signature healing Hatsu, wine to water, an ability that transmuted environmental moisture into a soothing, restorative aura stream to mend shattered tissue. I imprinted the card and activated it. A gentle, clear liquid aura wrapped around my palm as I pressed my hand against the dying prowler's chest. Thump, thump. The beast's ragged breathing stabilized. The deep lacerations closed, and the internal hemorrhaging stopped under the warm, restorative flow. Within moments, the creature was fully healed, its chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Phase 3, the emotional backlash. As the healing light faded, a sudden, heavy weight slammed into my chest. Niech. I stumbled back, pressing a hand against a nearby pine tree to steady myself. My breath came in sharp, shallow hitches, and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. It was the empathic backlash. Chronicle of the Departed didn't just copy mechanics. It required me to channel the exact emotional frequency of the original owner. For a split second, Kale's cold, absolute authority and dark, calculated precision from Black Symphony washed over my mind, making me feel ruthlessly distant. Right on its heels came Thomas's crushing, agonizing burden of self-sacrifice, the phantom pain of taking on another's suffering. The two conflicting emotional states collided inside my chest like a physical blow. Damn it. I gritted my teeth, forcing my mind to anchor back into my own identity, the 13-year-old transmigrator, the orphan, the hunter. I took 3 long, deliberate breaths, using Zetsu to flush the lingering empathic residue out of my system. Slowly, the phantom emotions receded, leaving only the quiet cold of the mountain forest. I looked down at my hands, feeling the lingering warmth of both techniques fading away. It's uncomfortable, I whispered, watching the bound alpha prowler twitch on the ground. But it's a necessary experiment. If I can learn to process the emotional backlash under live combat stress, I can wield any story in this world. The results of your experiment are actually crucial for your development. In fact, feeling that emotional backlash isn't a defect in your Hatsu, it's proof that the ability is working exactly as it's meant to. Here is why this result is both fascinating and vital for your growth as a hunter. Analysis of your experiment results. 1. Why you succeeded physically. Because your specialist nature stems from your status as a transmigrator carrying a dual post-mortem soul, your physical chassis and aura capacity act like an absolute sponge. You can handle the structural strain, the aura cost, and the physical execution of high-tier Hatsus without your body breaking down. Physically, you passed with flying colors. 2. The true price, emotional backlash. Your secret Hatsu is named empathic resonance for a reason. To replicate a Hatsu, you aren't just copying raw Nen code like a machine, you are tuning your soul to the exact frequency of the creator's mental state. Kale's Black Symphony requires absolute, cold authority, ruthless detachment, and total spatial domination. When you channel it, you temporarily absorb Kale's isolation and coldness. Thomas's Wine to Water requires profound self-sacrifice and unconditional empathy. When you channel it, you absorb Thomas's weight of carrying everyone else's suffering. When you stacked both techniques back to back, those two opposing emotional states, ruthless detachment versus self-sacrificing warmth, collided inside your mind. That is what caused the dizziness, cold sweat, and shortness of breath. Tactical takeaway. Yes, you got a phenomenal result. You proved that your blank chronicle cards work in live combat, that your hybrid defenses are lethal, and that your mental anchoring using Zetsu can purge the lingering emotional residue. You now know your exact limit, managing the human weight behind the technique. Chapter 78, The Mountain's Wrath. Kukanyu Mine Shaft, Entrance Threshold. The paralyzed alpha prowler lay quietly in the snow behind me, its ragged breathing completely stabilized thanks to Thomas's transposed healing Hatsu. I took one last deep breath, letting Zetsu purge the final lingering echoes of Kale's cold authority and Thomas's crushing self-sacrifice from my mind. The emotional residue faded, leaving my thoughts clear, sharp, and entirely my own. Copying specific people carries their emotional baggage, I reasoned, stepping over the frozen threshold of the mine entrance. If I want to clear a swarm without drowning in someone else's trauma, I need to imprint a concept that has no personal human owner, a raw, unfeeling force of nature. The damp cavern air reeked of wet fur, stale blood, and dark earth. Deep within the winding, shadowy tunnels, glowing yellow eyes began to snap open, one after another. Low, guttural snarls echoed off the damp granite walls. A dozen shadow claw prowlers emerged from the pitch-black depths, the green enhancement aura flickering along their obsidian claws. Inscribing a concept of nature. I reached into my inner coat pocket and pulled out a single, stark white card. Instead of calling upon memories of Kale, Thomas, or Jing, I reached back into the pure, impersonal memory of the mountain itself, the biting October gale howling through the Kukanyu peaks, the crushing weight of avalanche snow, and the relentless, merciless frost of high-altitude winter. It was a concept without a human face. No grief, no ambition, no sacrifice. Just the absolute, unfeeling indifference of nature. Secret HATSU imprint, ENVIRONMENTAL concept. Imprint title. Concept source, high-altitude mountain blizzard and kinetic compression. Aura trait, area of effect flash transmutation. Backlash risk, NEUTRAL. Swoosh. The blank white card in my fingers dissolved into a pale, frost blue mist. The moment the mist touched my skin, my aura output surged, not with emotional heat or cold detachment, but with the crisp, clean clarity of mountain air. Zero emotional backlash, my mind remained perfectly calm. The clearance strike. Raw. The Prowler pack lunged all at once, taking advantage of the narrow tunnel to swarm me in a coordinated strike. 10 beasts leapt through the air, their razor-sharp claws applying shoe to slice through steel and rock alike. I didn't deploy Oakhaven Aegis. I didn't step back. I slammed my right palm flat against the damp cavern floor. Boreal collapse. Boom crack crack crack. A shockwave of sub-zero transmuted aura erupted from my palm, traveling along the stone walls, ceiling, and floor of the mine shaft at terrifying speed. The air moisture inside the enclosed tunnel instantly flash froze. Spikes of solid, translucent ice burst out from every surface, interlocking like 1,000 razor-sharp spears. The sheer atmospheric pressure inside the tunnel spiked, compressing the air with enough force to shatter stone. The lunging prowlers were caught mid-air. In less than 2 seconds, the entire 30-foot section of the mine shaft was transformed into a frozen cavern of crystalline ice spikes. The beasts were instantly flash-frozen and pinned in place, their green enhancement aura extinguished without a single claw reaching within 10 feet of me. Mission accomplished. Silence returned to the Kukanyu mine. I stood up, brushing a layer of light frost off my coat sleeve, and looked over the frozen tunnel. The Prowler pack wasn't dead, the sudden freeze had placed them into deep cryogenic stasis, safely containing the entire nest without destroying the structural integrity of the mountain pass. I pulled out my association communicator, pressing the confirmation signal for the local authorities. Mission status, CONTAINMENT complete. Location, Kukanyu Pass Mine Shaft. Target status, 12/12 Shadow Claw Prowlers incapacitated and contained. Casualties, 0. Contract status, successful. Clean, I said softly, looking down at my bare palm. Testing Boreal Collapse proved a critical tactical milestone. When using Chronicle cards, imprinting impersonal environmental concepts provided massive area of effect utility while completely bypassing the mental fatigue of emotional backlash. I turned on my heel and walked out of the frozen mine shaft, ready to collect my first official bounty as a licensed hunter. The icy mist slowly dissipated, swirling out toward the mouth of the cave and disappearing into the gray mountain fog. I looked down at my bare palms. Not a single trace of aura remained lingering in the air, and my mind was crystal clear, no dizzying flashes of Kale's isolation, no crushing echoes of Thomas's self-sacrificing pain. Experiment succeeded, I thought, a quiet sense of triumph settling into my chest. Imprinting impersonal, environmental concepts like Boreal Collapse was the key to utilizing Chronicle cards in open combat without frying my own psyche. I could save personalized imprints, like Black Symphony or Wine to Water, for dire situations where specific, surgical precision was required. Still, I muttered to myself, adjusting my collar against the mountain draft. I have to be extremely careful. Locking down the evidence. Even though my Zetsu confirmed no one was around, a true hunter leaves nothing to chance, especially when hiding a specialist ability that could turn the entire hunter association upside down if discovered. If someone like Netero, Bisky, or Jing analyzed this cave, what would they see? 1. The cave interior, frozen solid with high-density transmuted cold aura. 2. The paralyzed alpha outside, wounds miraculously closed and healed. If an association investigator inspected the scene, the sheer variety of Nen types, transmutation, manipulation, enhancement, and healing, would immediately raise red flags. Can't have anyone connecting dots that shouldn't exist, I whispered. I stepped out of the cave toward the resting alpha prowler. Drawing a modest amount of my public aura, I brought my forearms together, summoning the brass braces of Oakhaven Aegis. I deliberately slammed my energy shield into the frozen rock face above the cave entrance, causing a controlled rockslide that partially collapsed the mouth of the tunnel. Then, I struck the dirt around the alpha beast, leaving clear, hexagonal impact craters matching the exact dimensions of my public Hatsu. Now, to any association forensic examiner, the scene told a simple, convincing story. Ren, a high-tier enhancer, conjurer rookie, used his Oakhaven braces to shatter the cave structure, trapping the pack in a localized environmental collapse and using heavy physical force to subdue the alpha. The mask remains on. I leaned against a pine tree at the edge of the clearing, pulling out my association satellite phone as the distant whir of local authority transport helicopters began to echo over the mountain ridge. This is licensed Hunter Ren, I said calmly into the receiver, keeping my tone crisp and professional. Target territory at Kukanyu Pass is secured. The Prowler pack has been contained within the primary shaft. Send the transport cages. Copy that, Hunter Ren. Exceptional work, containment units are 2 minutes out. I hung up, slipping the phone into my pocket alongside my stack of blank, white cardstock. My secret specialist Hatsu, Chronicle of the Departed, empathic resonance, remained what it was always meant to be, a ghost in the machine. A complete secret from Kale, Jing, Netero, and the rest of the world. To the Hunter Association, I was just a remarkably durable 14-year-old rookie with a heavy shield and a bright future. And as the sun began to peek through the dispersing fog over Padokia, I smiled faintly. 12 million Jenny in the bank, priority access to the Hunter archives unlocked, and my true power entirely intact. Chapter 78 Summary and Status. Experiment result, successful. Cover-up executed, scene manipulated to match public Hatsu. Secrecy status, 100% confidential. Current reward, 12 million Jenny plus Hunter archival access claimed. Chapter 79, Footprints in the Snow. Early November 1987, outskirts of Oakhaven, Zaban foothills. The local authorities in Padokia cleared the 12 million Jenny bounty into my account before the transport helicopters had even finished loading the frozen prowlers. With my first official contract complete and priority archival clearance unlocked at Hunter HQ, I didn't immediately head back to the noise of the city. Instead, I took a long, quiet detour west. 6 years. It had been 6 full years since late 1981, the year I woke up in this freezing, unfamiliar body as a terrified, starving 7-year-old child. Now, in late 1987, I was a 13-year-old licensed hunter with blood on my hands, Nen in my veins, and a vault of secret powers hidden behind a calm smile. The commercial train dropped me off at the quiet rural station 3 miles outside Oakhaven. I walked the rest of the way on foot, my boots crunching softly against the frosty gravel road winding through the pine forests beneath the shadow of the towering Zaban mountain range. The grave on the hill. Before entering the settlement itself, I took a narrow, overgrown dirt path leading up a grassy knoll overlooking the valley. There, sitting beneath the wide branches of an ancient oak tree, was a simple, weather-worn stone marker. No fancy engravings, no marble urns, just a modest piece of local slate carved with a single name. In memory of Elena 1955-1980. May the mountains grant you the peace the world denied. I stood before the grave in quiet silence, the cold November wind tugging at the hem of my coat. This was Ren's mother, a poor, nameless woman living on the margins of a logging settlement who had given birth to the body I now inhabited, the woman who had starved herself during the bitter winter of '80 so her little boy could have the last crust of dry bread before her heart finally gave out. I knelt down, brushing away the dead leaves and damp soil clinging to the base of the stone. "Hey," I whispered softly. It was a strange, surreal feeling. I wasn't the original Ren. I was an otherworldly soul who had inherited his frame, his face, and his breath on the night she passed away. Yet, as I touched the cold stone, a quiet, gentle warmth stirred deep inside my chest, not the chaotic, painful backlash of a copied Hatsu, but a soft, residual echo of childlike love lingering in the marrow of this body. "I survived," I said softly to the grave. "I met good people, I grew strong, nobody pushes us around anymore." I reached into my coat, pulled out a single blank white cardstock, and held it between my fingers. I didn't activate it, I just let the genuine, peaceful warmth of this moment soak into the paper, leaving behind a subtle, invisible mark of pure gratitude before slipping it safely back into my pocket. Returning to Oakhaven. Leaving the knoll, I walked down into the valley toward the settlement. Oakhaven hadn't changed much in 6 years. It was still a rough, isolated logging town, wooden cabins with smoke curling from stone chimneys, stacked timber piles lining the muddy main street, and a constant, rhythmic screech of saw blades and axes echoing from the sawmill. As I walked down the center road, my heavy hunter coat and composed stride drew curious glances from the rugged lumberjacks loading supply wagons. To them, I was a well-dressed young traveler passing through. None of them recognized the skinny, feral orphan who used to beg for scrap wood behind the tavern. First, I walked toward the edge of the logging yard where the heavy screech of the sawmill's circular saws echoed across the timber stacks. Back in '81, old man Corin was the gruff sawmill worker who used to sneak me off cuts of firewood and let me huddle near the mill's massive furnace when the nights dropped below freezing. And on the opposite side of the village, nestled near the tree line, stood a small wooden hut that was where Mrs. Martha lived, the gentle older woman who used to secretly leave wooden bowls of warm potato soup on her small porch for the village strays, including a starving 7-year-old me. They weren't a couple, just two kind, hard-working souls living their own lives in the same harsh mountain village, bound only by the quiet generosity they showed to an abandoned kid 6 years ago. I stood by the fence near the sawmill, my heart beating with a strange, nervous cadence I hadn't felt even when facing Ging's aura blasts or the Prowler pack. Are they both still alive? I wondered. 6 years was a long time in an isolated mountain village where winter claimed the elderly without mercy. I turned toward Mrs. Martha's little hut at the tree line first. As I approached the wooden gate, a heavy, familiar cough echoed from inside the small hut, followed by the faint scent of warm vegetable broth drifting from the chimney. The worn wooden door creaked open. Chapter 79 Summary and Status. Location: Oakhaven Settlement. Visits: Elena's grave. Returning places: Corin's sawmill, Mrs. Martha's small hut. Current time, late November 1987. Chapter 80, The Warmth of Two Souls. Late November 1987, Oakhaven Settlement. The worn wooden door of the small hut creaked wider. Out stepped an old woman wearing a faded woolen shawl pulled tight around her narrow shoulders. Her silver hair was tied back, and fresh wrinkles lined her face, but her warm hazel eyes were instantly recognizable. It was Mrs. Martha. She was still alive. She held a wooden bucket in her hands, pausing as her eyes landed on me standing near her small wooden gate, a tall 13-year-old boy in a heavy, well-tailored traveler's coat. "Oh, hello there, young man," she said, her voice raspy with age as she squinted through the cool mountain mist. "Are you lost? The main logging office is back." She stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes widened as she traced my features, the jawline, the dark eyes, the posture, until her hands suddenly began to tremble. "Ren," she gasped, clutching her shawl to her chest. "Dear Lord. Look at you. You've grown so much." I smiled gently, stepping through the gate. "It's good to see you, Mrs. Martha." Tears welled up in her weathered eyes as she set her bucket down and met me halfway, wrapping her arms around me in a warm, tight hug. "6 years," she whispered, pulling back to cup my face with her rough, warm hands. "Ever since that day Mr. Kale came to the village and took you with him, I prayed every single night that you were eating well and staying safe. And look at you now, so big, so strong." "Kale took good care of me," I replied, keeping my secret transmigrator origin entirely hidden, just as I always had. "He taught me well. I'm a licensed hunter now." Mrs. Martha wiped her tears with the corner of her apron, a beaming smile breaking across her face. "A hunter? Your mother would be so proud. Come, you must be freezing. Let me get you something warm." Before we sit down, I interrupted gently, resting a hand on her shoulder. "How is old man Corin? Is he still holding down the sawmill?" Mrs. Martha let out a soft, fond laugh. "That stubborn old mule, you know him, Ren. Ever since you left with Kale, he's been at that sawmill every single day. Go on down there, he's probably grumbling over pine stacks right now." The sawmill and the reconnecting grump. Leaving my heavy traveling pack at Mrs. Martha's hut, I walked down the muddy road toward the central sawmill yard. The deafening screech of industrial circular saws and the heavy thud of timber logs filled the cold air. Inside the open-air timber shed, surrounded by mountains of fresh pine sawdust, stood old man Corin. He looked older, his broad back slightly hunched under his grease-stained flannel shirt, his thick beard peppered with white, but his massive hands still moved with the practiced efficiency of a man who had worked raw wood his entire life. "Move those pine boards to the dry rack," Corin barked at two younger lumberjacks, wiping sweat from his brow with a soot-stained rag. "And don't drop 'em like last week." I leaned against a heavy timber pillar near the entrance, crossing my arms with a faint smirk. "You're still as loud as ever, old man." Corin froze. He slowly turned around, his sharp gray eyes narrowing beneath his bushy eyebrows as he stared at me. "Who's asking?" he grunted. "Just the kid Kale dragged away 6 years ago," I said, stepping out into the ambient light of the furnace embers. Corin's jaw tightened. He dropped his timber hook, his heavy boots crunching against the sawdust as he stomped over to me. He stood tall, inspecting me from head to toe with an intense, unblinking glare. "Ren," he grunted, his gruff voice cracking just a fraction. He reached out a massive, calloused hand, clapping it heavily against my shoulder, checking my frame, feeling the solid, dense muscle underneath my coat. A slow, rare grin broke through his messy beard. "Ha, so that suited guy Kale didn't feed you to the wolves after all, Corin chuckled, shaking his head. Look at you, you actually grew into a proper frame. I survived, I smiled, holding his firm grip. Thanks to the firewood and scrap pine you let me take before I left. Bah, Corin muttered, waving a dismissive hand, though his eyes softened with genuine relief. It was just scrap pine. But, I'm glad you came back to show your face, kid. Really am. A quiet evening of gratitude. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the jagged peaks of the Zaban Range, the three of us gathered inside Mrs. Martha's warm. The small wood-burning stove crackled merrily, filling the cozy room with the rich aroma of fresh potato soup and baked bread. Corin sat on a sturdy wooden stool near the fire, nursing a mug of dark ale, while Mrs. Martha sat across from me, endlessly filling my bowl every time it dipped halfway empty. They remembered the day Cale took me in back in '82. To them, it was the start of a bright future for a starving orphan. They didn't know about my previous life on Earth, my dual soul nature, or the deadly world of specialist Nen abilities, and they didn't need to. In a world as brutal and uncertain as the Hunter x Hunter universe, these two elderly people were a rare, sacred warmth. Before I left early the next morning, while Corin was helping Mrs. Martha fetch water from the well, I quietly reached into my coat. Using a fraction of the 12 million Jenny bounty I had earned from the Padokia contract, I tucked a thick leather pouch containing 2 million Jenny inside Mrs. Martha's pantry behind the flour tin, accompanied by a small written note. For the firewood, the soup, and the warm memories, please live comfortably. Standing at the edge of Oakhaven one last time, watching the morning chimney smoke rise into the crisp winter sky, I felt a deep, profound sense of peace settle over my spirit. My debts were honored, my roots were settled, and my path forward as a hunter was clearer than ever. Chapter 80 Summary and Status. Location: Oakhaven Settlement. Reunion status: reunited with Mrs. Martha and Old Man Corin. Continuity fixed: acknowledged Cale's past departure, farewell with Ren in 1982. Secrecy: Transmigrator secret 100% maintained. Financial aid: left 2 million Jenny anonymously to support their retirement. Chapter 81 Dreams of the Departed. Late November 1987, Oakhaven Settlement. Before stepping out into the chilly dawn, I doubled back toward the kitchen table. I didn't just leave a single leather pouch behind the flour tin for Mrs. Martha. I pulled a second thick envelope from my inner coat pocket, loaded with another crisp 1 million Jenny in Hunter banknotes, and slid it beneath Old Man Corin's heavy iron tobacco tin on the side table. 2 million Jenny in total, split evenly between the two souls who had kept a starving orphan alive 6 years ago. Oakhaven gift distribution. Mrs. Martha, 1 million Jenny. Old Man Corin, 1 million Jenny. Note left, for the warmth, the firewood, and the soup. Live well. I pulled my blanket up on the small cot in Mrs. Martha's guest room, closed my eyes, and let the rhythmic crackle of the wood-burning stove lull me to sleep. The boundary of souls. Sleep didn't bring blackness. It brought a strange, weightless fog. The air smelled faintly of wild mountain flowers and damp pine needles, a scent I hadn't smelled since 1982. I opened my eyes in the dream, finding myself standing in an endless, misty meadow bathed in pale, twilight silver. This was the second time. The first time I had ever seen him was during those grueling late-night training sessions on Greed Island with Jing, when my dual soul nature was pushed to its absolute threshold while developing Chronicle of the Departed. Standing 20 feet away in the mist was a 7-year-old boy with dark hair and familiar, quiet eyes. The original Ren. His spirit was clear, whole, and completely peaceful, devoid of the fear, cold, and starvation that had claimed his body 6 years ago. But this time, he wasn't alone. Standing beside him, her hand gently resting on his small shoulder, was a young woman in a simple, faded linen dress. She had soft, tired features, gentle dark eyes, and a quiet grace that no amount of poverty could erase. Elena, Ren's mother. The silent blessing. I froze, standing in the silvery grass. I didn't reach for my aura. I didn't reach for a blank card. The boy, the original owner of the bone, muscle, and marrow I now inhabited, took a step forward. He looked at me, taking in my tall 13-year-old frame, my hunter coat, and the calm, steady strength in my eyes. He didn't speak with words. In this realm, thoughts resonated like soft bells. Thank you, his spirit echoed softly, a bright, genuine smile touching his small face. You took care of them. You took care of our name. Elena looked at me too. There was no anger in her eyes, no resentment toward the otherworldly transmigrator soul who had claimed her son's physical vessel after her death. Instead, her gaze carried the quiet, unconditional warmth of a mother who saw that her child's body was safe, fed, strong, and surrounded by meaningful purpose. She offered a gentle nod, her lips forming a silent word. Live. The silver mist began to glow softly, dissolving the meadow around us. Elena wrapped her arms around her son, and together, their lingering earthly forms turned into pale, floating specks of starlight, merging seamlessly into the ambient ether of the world. Dawn in Oakhaven. Gasp. My eyes snapped open. I sat up on the small cot, taking a deep, shuddering breath of cool morning air. Sunlight was just beginning to bleed through the wooden window shutters of Mrs. Martha's hut, casting warm golden streaks across the floorboards. I sat there in the quiet room for a long moment, pressing my palm against my chest. Thump, thump, thump. My heart beat with a rhythm that felt lighter, cleaner, and completely unburdened. For 6 years, deep in my subconscious, a quiet guilt had lingered, the feeling that I was an intruder living in a dead boy's skin. Now, that weight was gone. The dual post-mortem souls inside me weren't at war or straining under empathic friction anymore. They were in absolute harmony. I reached into my coat, pulling out my stack of stark white cards. A single card at the top of the deck carried a faint, permanent watermark, a delicate silver leaf pattern that emitted no aura, but radiated a quiet, unbreakable mental stability. HATSU System Evolution, PERFECT Harmony. Status, Dual Soul Reconciled. Empathic Resistance, Increased Tolerance against Emotional Backlash from Copied. Hatsu Techniques. Physical Chassis, Absolute Alignment between Soul and Body achieved. I smiled, slipping the deck back into my inner pocket, dressing silently, and stepping out into the crisp mountain morning to begin my return journey to the Hunter Association. Chapter 82, The Master's Appraisal. December 20, 1987, Hunter Association HQ, Sector 4 Training Annex. The morning sun cast long, golden slanted beams through the reinforced glass ceiling of the subterranean training hall. The air inside smelled of ozone, polished marble, and old iron. Kale stood at the center of the vast ring, leaning lightly on his silver-headed cane. His black suit was immaculate, his graying hair combed back neatly. He watched me with sharp, measured eyes as I walked across the arena floor, my footfalls echoing against the stone. "You're late," Kale remarked, his voice smooth and dry. "Though I suppose clearing your first official contract in under 48 hours earns you a few minutes of leeway." "Traffic in Sector 4, I replied with a faint smirk, tossing my heavy coat onto a nearby bench. Besides, I didn't come here just to file a written report. Kale raised an eyebrow, resting both hands on the head of his cane. Oh, you want a formal review. I want an honest judgment, I corrected him, stepping into the center circle 20 feet away from him. 10, Shu, N, and my Hatsu. I've spent the last month refining my foundation after Padokia. Tell me where I stand. Kale's eyes narrowed slightly, a quiet, dangerous spark flickering in his deep blue irises. Very well, Ren, show me what 6 years of survival and a single-star mission have made of you. Step 1, 10 and N, the foundation. I took a deep breath, dropping my center of gravity. I didn't shout or flare my aura with unnecessary dramatics. Instead, I opened the flow of my aura nodes simultaneously. Shu. A dense, crystalline layer of shroud-like aura erupted around my body. My 10 was so tightly controlled, so perfectly contained, that not a single droplet of lifespan aura leaked into the room. It clung to my skin like a suit of liquid armor, thick, silent, and motionless. Kale's gaze softened into subtle approval. Flawless containment, no wasted energy. Now, expand. Without breaking my posture, I shifted my 10 into N. WOOSH. My aura bloomed outward in a perfect, uniform sphere of pale blue energy, expanding past 5 meters. 10 meters, 15 meters, and snapping to a firm stop at 20 meters. Every dust mote, every vibration in the air, every subtle shift in Kale's weight was instantly mapped onto my brain. Because my dual soul structure was now in absolute, frictionless harmony, maintaining a 20-meter N didn't cause a single microsecond of mental fatigue or headache. 20 meters with absolute density, Kale observed, stepping forward. The moment his cane touched the boundary of my N, I felt the precise kinetic weight of his movement down to the millimeter. Your mental composure during N expansion is startling for a 13-year-old. Step 2. Shu, the tool. I collapsed my N back into my body instantly, pulling a pair of plain, heavy steel throwing daggers from my belt pouch. I channeled my aura into the metal. Shu. Normally, basic Shu simply coats an object to increase its durability. But with my refined aura control, the steel blades didn't just glow, they hummed with high-frequency aura vibration. The light around the edges of the daggers distorted, making the dull practiced steel sharp enough to slice through armored plating. I flicked my wrist. THWACK thwack thwack. 3 daggers flew across the arena, burying themselves hilt deep into a solid titanium target block 40 yards away, shearing through the reinforced alloy as if it were soft butter. Impeccable aura transmission, Kale noted, walking over to inspect the deep, cleanly severed cuts in the titanium block. You aren't just wrapping the metal, you're converting your aura density into pure structural pressure. Step 3. Hatsu, the public mask and the true frame. And your Hatsu? Kale asked, turning to face me with a serious expression. Show me Oakhaven Aegis. I brought my forearms together. Clang. Heavy, brass-hued hexagonal braces manifested over my wrists, projecting a dense, shimmering barrier of translucent energy in front of me. But this time, the aura behind Oakhaven Aegis wasn't just a static shield. It was smoother, richer, and possessed a terrifyingly stable core, the direct result of my soul alignment. Kale raised his cane, channeling a sharp thread of his own transmuted aura into the tip, and struck my barrier with a swift, lightning-fast thrust. Clang boom. The shockwave echoed off the cavernous walls of the training room. The floor beneath my boots cracked, but my posture didn't shift an inch. My shield absorbed the kinetic impact effortlessly, dispersing Kale's aura thread without a single flicker. Kale's verdict. The training hall fell dead silent. Kale lowered his cane, smoothing out his suit jacket with a slow, deliberate motion. He stared at me for 3 long seconds, his expression completely unreadable, before a quiet, rare smile broke across his face. Kale's formal performance evaluation. 10. Grade S. N. Grade A+. Shu. Grade A. HATSU. Grade S. 6 years ago, I pulled a starving boy out of the snow in Oakhaven, Kale said softly, walking over to stand beside me. Today, I am looking at a combat-ready single-star tier hunter. He rested his hand on my shoulder, a gesture he rarely offered. Your foundation in the basic principles is so solid that even floor masters at the Heavens Arena would struggle to find a seam in your defense. But more importantly, Ren. Kale looked into my eyes, his sharp gaze searching my face. Your spirit seems different. The hidden tension you always carried, the quiet weight behind your eyes, it's gone. I smiled faintly, feeling the quiet, unbroken strength resting inside my chest. I settled my debts, I said simply. I'm whole now. Kale nodded in satisfaction, tapping his cane once against the floorboards. Good, because with your foundation where it is, you are ready for what comes next. The association's restricted archives are waiting for you. Chapter 83, The Bet That I Love to Lose. December 30th, 1987, Sector 4 Central Train Station. The final 10 days of December had been remarkably quiet, and unusually tense. Kale was constantly busy. He was on his phone at odd hours, writing letters, and pacing through his office with a sharp furrow between his brows. Whenever I asked if something was wrong, he would simply offer a polite, practiced smile and say, "It's nothing for you to worry about, Ren. Focus on your archival studies." But on the freezing night of December 30th, as steam billowed from the roof of the late-night locomotive bound for the Eastern Territories, Kale stood beside me on the snowy platform, leaning heavily on his cane. "You've been distracted all week, Kale," I said quietly, pulling my collar up against the biting wind. "Are you going to tell me what's going on?" Kale stared out at the iron tracks, his breath pluming in the dark air. He stayed silent for a long moment before letting out a soft, dry chuckle. "It's about a bet, Ren," he murmured softly. "A bet that I love to lose. The annual wager." Kale turned to look at me, his sharp blue eyes carrying a rare, heavy vulnerability. "Every year, around this time, Father Thomas and I have a tradition. An annual wager that we've kept going since the day we first met at St. Jude's." He tapped his silver-headed cane against the frosted platform. "The rules are simple. If Thomas sends at least one child out of Meteor City and into my care within a 12-month period, Thomas wins the bet. If an entire year passes and he sends no one, I win." I frowned, piecing the logic together. "If Thomas wins, it means things are good," Kale interrupted softly, a bittersweet smile touching his lips. "It means Thomas found a child in the squalor of Meteor City who had a spark, a chance, a future, and he smuggled them out to me so I could place them into safety. If Thomas wins, a kid gets saved." Kale swept his arm toward the glowing streetlights of the city beyond the station. "Look around this district, Ren. The cocky young tailor who made your coat, the blacksmith down in the lower quarter, the mechanic who runs the repair shop near the docks. Every single one of them was an orphan from St. Jude's in Meteor City. Thomas won those bets. I helped those kids find a real, honest life here." His smile slowly vanished, replaced by a cold, hollow shadow. "But this year, I won." The silence from St. Jude's. The steam engine whistled loudly in the distance, but the sound felt miles away. For the first time in nearly a decade, Cale said, his voice barely audible over the wind, a full year has passed, and Thomas hasn't sent a single child. No letters, no smuggled runaways, no contact. He closed his eyes, his grip tightening on his cane until his knuckles turned white. If I win the bet, it means something is terribly wrong. Something has happened in Meteor City, or at St. Jude's. I stood beside my mentor, looking at the heavy worry etched into the face of the man who had given me a home 6 years ago. I didn't hesitate. I reached into my coat, adjusting my leather gloves and checking the weight of my deck of blank cards inside my pocket. The archives can wait, I said calmly, stepping toward the boarding ramp of the train. Let's go check on Father Thomas, Sister Elena, and the kids. Cale looked at me, a flash of genuine gratitude softening his sharp gaze. Meteor City is no place for the soft-hearted, Ren, Cale warned, stepping up onto the train platform beside me. It's an unmapped scrap heap ruled by shadow laws. I know, I replied with a faint, confident smirk. Good thing I'm an elite single-star tier hunter with a shield. The train doors hissed shut behind us, and the heavy engine lurched forward into the snowstorm, carrying us east toward the dark, forgotten borders of Meteor City. Chapter 84, The Ashes of Meteor City. Early January 1988, border of Meteor City. The sky above Meteor City wasn't blue, it was a bruised, heavy orange, choked with the smoke of burning garbage tire fires and smoldering concrete. My memory from my past life served me well. Right around this period, late 1987 into 1989, the Phantom Troop had begun making its mark, throwing the fragile, chaotic equilibrium of Meteor City into utter turmoil. Beneath the surface of the garbage heaps, a full-blown civil war had erupted among the local elders, scrap warlords, and rouge gangs fighting for territory. We can't take the main transit route, Cale whispered, crouching behind a towering wall of rusted shipping containers at the city's perimeter. The border checkpoints are gone. It's a war zone. Across the barren scrap flats, heavy gunfire echoed, punctuated by the rhythmic, terrifying thump thump of Nen-reinforced explosives detonating in the outer districts. I've got us, I replied, my eyes fixed on the horizon. Infiltration through the crossfire. We didn't ride in on a wagon or a train. We sneaked in through the shadow of the colossal trash heaps. Infiltration profile, WARZONESECTOR8. Threat level, EXTREME. Environment, unmapped smoldering scrapland, zero law enforcement. Tactic, low output stealth and barrier flank. I kept my aura tucked tightly inside my body with Zetsu, moving like a phantom alongside Cale through narrow alleyways formed by compressed scrap metal. Whenever stray bullets or stray Nen projectiles whizzed through the smoke from distant skirmishes, I deployed a micro-instant of Oakhaven Aegis, deflecting the shrapnel without letting off a bright flare of energy. After 3 hours of navigating burned-out districts, mortar craters, and guarded gang territories, we finally reached the familiar cobblestone alley leading to St. Jude's Sanctuary. The shelter in the storm. The old stone chapel of St. Jude's was still standing, but it had completely transformed. The iron gates were welded shut and reinforced with heavy sheet metal and razor wire. The stained glass windows were sandbagged from the inside. Dozens of wounded refugees, terrified women, and malnourished children were huddled in the courtyard under makeshift tarps. St. Jude's had become a sanctuary in the most literal sense, an isolated island of survival in the middle of a burning war zone. Hold, state your business. A harsh, tired voice called out from the sandbagged balcony above the church doors. A young man stood there, holding a rusted rifle with trembling hands. Cale stepped out from the shadows of the alley, lowering his hood and leaning lightly on his silver-headed cane. "Lower the iron, son," Cale said softly, his voice carrying clearly through the crackle of distant gunfire. "Tell Father Thomas that his rival has come to collect on a lost bet." Reunion in the sanctuary. The iron gates creaked open just wide enough for us to slip inside before being slammed shut and heavy iron bolts shot into place. "Cale!" A woman's voice gasped from the chapel doors. Sister Elena stood there, wearing a mud-stained habit, her face pale and exhausted, holding a tray of clean bandages. When her eyes shifted from Cale to me, her jaw dropped. "Ren, dear God, you're both here." "Elena," Cale nodded, stepping forward. "Where is Thomas?" Before she could answer, the wooden doors of the inner nave pushed open. Father Thomas stepped out into the courtyard. The corrupt, cynical priest looked battered, his black cassock was torn, his knuckles were bruised, and dark circles shadowed his weary eyes. But when he saw Cale standing in his courtyard, a raspy, disbelieving laugh broke from his chest. "You absolute fool," Thomas grunted, staggering down the steps and clapping Cale heavily on the shoulder. "I don't send you a kid for 12 months, so you walk straight into a civil war to find out why." "You owe me a bottle of wine, Thomas," Cale replied, though his eyes were searching the overcrowded courtyard with deep concern. "What happened here?" Thomas's expression darkened as he looked out over the scores of frightened orphans and wounded civilians seeking shelter inside his church. "Meteor City is tearing itself apart," Thomas said quietly, his voice heavy with the weight of leadership. "Old gang lords dying, new monsters rising from the shadows, and St. Jude's is the only piece of ground left where they haven't started shooting." He turned his gaze to me, his sharp eyes taking in my stature, my posture, and the calm aura humming beneath my coat. "Look at you, Ren," Thomas murmured softly. "You came back to a graveyard." "No," I said, looking around at the children huddled beneath the tarps, my hand resting comfortably over my deck of blank cards. "We came back to make sure it stays a shelter." Down below in the courtyard, there was no rest. Sister Elena was moving frantically between rows of makeshift cots, dabbing sweat from feverish children and changing blood-soaked bandages with trembling hands. Father Thomas had barely finished greeting us before he was dragged away to tend to a refugee who had just been carried through the side doors with a shattered leg. Every soul inside St. Jude's was running on pure adrenaline and desperation. By 2 in the morning, the heavy iron doors were bolted tight again. The muffled crying of frightened kids quieted down into a low, collective murmur. Leave it to 3 men with bad habits to find the only quiet spot left in a war zone, the slate roof behind the bell tower. Cheap liquor and stale smoke. The cold January wind blew dark, ash-laden smoke across the roof. I sat on the edge of the stone parapet, dangling my boots over the dark drop, while Cale leaned his back against the brick chimney. Thomas slumped onto a wooden crates, pulling a battered pack of cheap, crumpling cigarettes from his torn cassock. Flick. The match lit his pale, hollow face for a brief second before he inhaled deeply, blowing a thick stream of grey smoke into the freezing night air. He held out an unlabeled, clear glass bottle filled with harsh, bottom-shelf grain alcohol. "Drink," Thomas grunted, tossing the bottle toward Cale. "It tastes like kerosene and battery acid, but it stops the hands from shaking." Cale caught the bottle, taking a small, refined sip before wincing slightly. "Gods above, Thomas, your taste in liquor hasn't improved in 6 years." "Fuck my taste," Thomas spat, snatching the bottle back and taking a massive, ungodly swig that would have choked an ordinary man. He wiped his mouth with the back of his bruised forearm and pointed a cigarette at me. And look at this kid, sitting there like a goddamn statue while the whole world burns around us. You really turned him into a monster, didn't you, Kale? He turned himself into one, Kale replied smoothly, pulling his coat tight against the chill. Now stop dodging the question, Thomas. What the hell happened to Meteor City? The story of the spiders. Thomas took another long drag of his cigarette, the tip glowing a harsh ember red in the dark. It started 6 months ago, Thomas grumbled, his voice turning low and dark. Some cocky, arrogant bastards from the lower districts decided the old elders were too slow, too soft, too outdated. You know how this city works, elders keep the scrap trade moving, the warlords keep the peace, everyone gets their slice of garbage. Balance. He spat over the edge of the roof, watching his phlegm disappear into the dark courtyard below. Then those freaks showed up. The Spider, Phantom Troop, they call themselves. A bunch of cold-blooded, absolute sociopaths led by that black-haired bastard with the cross on his head. I kept my face completely neutral, though my mind registered every word. They didn't want a slice of the pie, Thomas continued, shaking his head bitterly. They wanted to burn the whole fucking bakery down. They slaughtered 3 local elders in their own beds. No negotiations, no political games, just total, ruthless execution. That created a power vacuum, and every half-assed gang warlord in Sector 8 immediately grabbed their guns to fight for the dead men's seats. Thomas looked over at me, his sharp, tired eyes softening just a fraction beneath his brow. I owe you a debt, Ren, Thomas murmured, tapping his cigarette against the brickwork. Back when you were just a scrawny stray running around here, you warned me. You told me straight to my face, if you ever see people with spider tattoos, don't try to mediate. Don't engage, just pull back and hide. He took another swig from the bottle. If I hadn't listened to your weird, creepy-ass warning, I would have tried to intervene when they marched through the central square. And my head would be sitting on a pike in Sector 4 right now. Instead, I pulled every kid, every sister, and every scrap of food back inside these church walls and locked the gates. The war at the gates. So St. Jude's became a neutral zone, Cale observed, leaning on his cane. Neutral my ass, Thomas cursed, laughing bitterly. We're a fucking sitting duck. The warlords leave us alone for now because Elena heals their wounded guys when they dump M at the gate. But the moment food runs out, or some trigger-happy gang decides they want our roof for a sniper nest, this church is going to turn into a meat grinder. He tossed the finished cigarette butt into the dark, crushing it under his boot. I lost the bet, Cale, Thomas said softly, his rough voice dropping into a quiet, heavy murmur. I couldn't send you any kids this year. I couldn't even get a letter out past the barricades without the courier getting shot in the back. I'm sorry. Cale didn't answer with words. He simply reached out, taking the cheap bottle of liquor from Thomas's hand, and took a long, heavy drink himself without making a face. I looked out over the burning skyline of Meteor City. Smoke plumes rose into the starry night, and the faint, distant rattle of machine gun fire echoed across the hills of trash. I reached inside my coat, feeling the smooth, cool edge of my deck of blank white cards. They won't break through those iron gates, Thomas, I said quietly, my voice ringing with a cold, absolute certainty that made both old men look at me. You kept these kids alive while the city tore itself apart. Now Cale and I are here. Thomas stared at me for a long moment, a slow, ugly, relieved smirk slowly spreading across his scarred face. Listen to this cocky little bastard, Thomas grunted, shaking his head as he pulled out another cigarette. God help whoever tries to kick our doors down tomorrow. Chapter 85. Saintess Elena and the 32 Guardian Angels. January 1988, St. Jude's Sanctuary, Sector 8. If Father Thomas was the iron gate keeping the war at bay, Sister Elena was the warm hearth keeping 32 broken souls alive inside it. While the city outside devoured itself in grease, blood, and gunfire, Sister Elena moved through the dimly lit nave of the church like a quiet, unwavering light. She slept no more than 2 hours a night on a thin wooden bench behind the altar. Her hands, raw, chapped, and stained with iodine, never stopped moving. When local scrap gangs dumped 3 bleeding teenagers at the wooden doors at dawn, she didn't ask which warlord they fought for. She simply knelt in the dust, wiped the grime from their faces, and began sewing their flesh back together. When food ran dangerously low, she quietly gave away her own soup portion to the youngest ones, claiming with a faint smile that she had already eaten in the kitchen. The refugees called her the Saintess of the Scraps. But to the children, she was just the only mother they had ever known. The 32 Guardian Angels. This is how 32 broken pieces found their way under one roof, and how they transformed a chapel into an impenetrable fortress of survival. St. Jude's Orphanage Registry. Total children, 32 Guardian Angels. Age range, 4 to 14 years old. Status, active shelter duty and sanctuary logistics. The senior line. Leo, sold to Gaston's organ brokers for 50,000 jenny by his older brother. Father Thomas broke the broker's jaw with a brass candlestick and dragged Leo out of an iron cage 3 days before the syndicate collapsed. O shelter duty, perimeter captain. Leo uses his cold sharpness to lead the elder kids, managing shift rotations on the high roof and making sure anyone slips past the perimeter. Karen, sat frozen for 16 hours on a high sorting crane in District 3, holding her mother's hand after a pipe burst flooded their shift with toxic solvent. O shelter duty, lookout and signal officer. Perched on the highest point of the bell tower with binoculars, she tracks gang troop movements across the trash dunes and flashes mirror signals down to Thomas. Jax, left face down in a rusted iron dumpster after getting caught in a gang crossfire. Sister Elena spent 4 hours pulling 16 hot copper fragments out of his leg. O shelter duty, heavy logistics and runner. Despite a slight limp, Jax carries water barrels, hauls sandbags, and works alongside Leo to fortify the lower courtyard. Vesper, abandoned under an engine block at an auto stripping yard as a toddler. He walked 4 miles through a dust storm holding a broken transistor radio until he collapsed on the chapel steps. O shelter duty, communications and signal repair. Vesper spends his time tinkering with wire, copper scrap, and radio tubes, keeping the sanctuary's makeshift shortwave receiver tuned into local gang frequencies. Cora, pulled from an illegal underground cotton carding cellar with lungs full of white fibers. She stays inside now, mending 31 sets of patched clothes. O shelter duty, quartermaster and tailor. Cora oversees the fabric and bedding supplies, turning scrap canvas into bandages, warm coats, and curtain insulation for cold windows. Gideon, a former street lookout who lost 2 fingers to severe frostbite while forced to guard a gang's liquor stash during the blizzard of '84. O shelter duty, armory and gate maintenance. Using his street smarts, Gideon maintains the pulleys, heavy sliding deadbolts, and defensive spike traps along the front iron gate. The outfield detail. Darius, hiding inside a cold stone furnace pipe while rival gangs torched his block. He didn't speak a single word for his first 6 months at the sanctuary. O shelter duty, silent scout. Darius moves noiselessly through the church cellar and rafters, checking for structural cracks, gas leaks, or stray embers from outside explosions. Sora, left behind in an empty brick barracks when an unannounced labor audit deported her mother's entire unregistered factory shift overnight. Shelter duty, sanitary lead. Sora organizes the cleaning crews, making sure disinfectant, lye soap, and clean water are distributed so disease doesn't spread through the crowded shelter. Bryn escaped an illegal textile shed after the overseer locked the iron doors and fled the district to dodge a gambling debt. Shelter duty, fuel master. Bryn manages the coal, dried scrap timber, and peat fuel stacks, rationing firewood so the church stove never goes out during sub-zero nights. Nia, found wandering the chemical marshlands, her throat raw and bleeding from inhaling sulfur fumes from the smelting pits. Shelter duty, kitchen operations. Nia works directly beside Sister Elena, prepping dry grains, boiling water, and rationing soup portions so everyone gets fed. Marco and John, twins trapped inside a submerged storm drain during a flash monsoon. Thomas waded chest deep into the black sludge to pull him out by their hair seconds apart. Shelter duty, water and plumbing riggers. The two brothers never let go of each other's sleeves as they operate the hand pumps, clear clogged drain pipes, and filter rainwater for drinking. Paz, caught stealing a hot loaf of rye bread from a market stall. Thomas paid the baker double, cursed the man out for threatening a kid, and dragged Paz home by the ear. Shelter duty, ration distribution. Paz uses his sharp eyes to make sure no refugee or child takes more than their fair share, enforcing strict food discipline without cruelty. Tariq, found sleeping inside a crate of rotted citrus outside the central market grid, eating melon rinds to keep his stomach from cramping. Shelter duty, pantry inspector. Tariq checks food crates for mold, rot, and rodents, preserving every scrap of dry rice and canned meat they have left. Hannah, found asleep inside a freight car bound for the slag furnace, her arms wrapped tightly around a box of waterlogged, ruined books. Shelter duty, schoolmistress. In the choir loft, Hannah reads salvaged textbooks to the younger kids, keeping their minds off the war with stories and spelling lessons. Iris, blinded in her right eye when an industrial acid battery exploded in a refinement trench where she was picking copper wire. Shelter duty, medical assistant. Iris sits by Sister Elena's side during surgical prep, organizing gauze, threading needles, and washing bloody surgical tools. MIA, the lone survivor of an arson raid in District 5. Thomas found her sitting on a heap of smoldering ash, holding a charred wooden spoon and staring blankly at the grey clouds. Shelter duty, nursery aide. MIA spends her days in the inner sanctuary, softly humming to the toddlers to keep them calm when mortar shelling shakes the floor. Nico, Sister Elena scooped him off the iron treads of a trash compacting truck 2 seconds before the driver engaged the engine. Shelter duty, scrap collector. Nico picks through the inner courtyard for drop nails, iron brackets, and usable metal offcuts to hand over to Gideon. Rocco, thrown into a plastic sorting bin as a newborn because of a twisted right ankle. He learned to crawl across scrap iron long before he could walk. Shelter duty, mess hall helper. Rocco drags light wooden crates to set up dining tables for the younger kids, moving remarkably fast despite his bad ankle. Silas, rendered completely mute after witnessing a street execution in District 6. He communicates solely through fast hand signals with Jax. Shelter duty, silent messenger. Silas runs handwritten notes and hand-signaled orders between Father Thomas at the gate and Leo on the roof. The nursery and toddlers. Zoe, Sasha, Finnegan. Shelter duty, toddler guardians. Rescued from dust storms, packs of feral hounds, and steep pipe falls, these 3 older toddlers keep watch over the younger ones, helping them fold blankets and clean their tin-eating bowls. Mina, Kaylin, Remy. Oh, shelter duty, bandage rollers. Recovered from paint waste, duffel bags, and cholera fever, they sit on clean canvas mats rolling washed cotton strips into tight medical rolls for Sister Elena. Lita, Eli, Ollie, Etta. Oh, shelter duty, light housekeeping. Rescued from locked toolboxes, deserted labs, glass heaps, and monsoon floods, these 4 spend their afternoons stacking tin cups, sweeping floorboards, and gathering scrap paper for the furnace. Oh. Toby and Lyra. Oh, shelter duty, the sanctuary spirits. Dropped on the church steps as newborns in the exact same grease-stained rag months apart, the youngest brother and sister bring pure warmth to the shelter, giving tight hugs to wounded refugees and keeping spirits high. A system built on survival. They don't cry anymore, Cale murmured softly, standing beside me in the shadows of the choir balcony as we watched the 32 children carry out their tasks with rhythmic, military precision. Down below, 9-year-old Iris was handing sterile needles to Sister Elena while 12-year-old Gideon tightened the heavy iron pulley on the main entrance. None of them flinched when a distant explosion rattled the stained glass windows above. They've adapted, I said quietly, leaning my forearms against the stone railing. In Meteor City, if you don't adapt, you become scrap. But Elena and Thomas gave them a purpose instead. Sister Elena walked over to the altar carrying a large tin tub filled with thin grain porridge. Her knees visibly trembled from exhaustion, but the moment she turned to face the 32 children sitting quietly on the rug, her face lit up with a radiant, gentle warmth. Dinner is served, my angels, she called out softly, clapping her hands. Line up by age, and remember your manners. Not a single child rushed or shoved. Jax made sure the toddlers took their seats first. Cora and Hannah made sure every little one had a wooden spoon. Watching Sister Elena dish out thin broth with the grace of a queen hosting a royal banquet, I felt a quiet, fierce warmth settle deep inside my chest. This wasn't just a church or a refugee camp. These 32 children were the beating heart of Meteor City, 32 broken pieces forged into 32 guardian angels who refused to break. I reached into my coat, touching the smooth edges of my deck of blank cards. 32 kids, 2 exhausted guardians. Cale, I murmured, my eyes fixing on the heavy front gates as the distant sound of heavy, deliberate combat boots began echoing down the outer alleyway. I hear them, Cale replied softly, his hand settling over the silver handle of his cane. The calm inside St. Jude's was about to be tested. Chapter 86, The Water Turned to Wine. January 1988, St. Jude's Sanctuary, Sector 8. The distant rhythmic thud of heavy combat boots echoed down the concrete alleyway outside, but inside the choir loft, Cale didn't rush to draw his sword. He leaned back against the dusty stone balustrade, watching Father Thomas in the courtyard below. The giant priest was currently downing a generous swig of dark red wine straight from a glass bottle, winking at 2 teenage girls who had brought him a basket of laundry, before hoisting a massive iron beam onto his shoulder like it weighed nothing. You Alwacies called him a corrupt priest, I murmured, keeping my voice low. And an ex-hunter. I know he loves his liquor, money, and flirting with pretty local women. But under all that greed and sleaze, he's genuinely kind-hearted. How did you 2 first cross paths? Cale let out a soft, dry chuckle, a rare, genuine sound from him. Because Thomas wears his vices like armor, Cale said softly, his dark eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight from the altar below. He lets the world think he's just a greedy, wine-drunk degenerate. I met him all the way back in 1975, 13 years ago, when I was tracking a rogue Nen user through the southern borderlands. Kale's Tale, the Borderland Gambling Den. It was the spring of '75, Kale began, his tone shifting into that quiet, measured rhythm he used when recalling the distant past. I had been pursuing a syndicate hitman into a lawless border town. I walked into a noisy, smoke-filled gambling den run by a local militia that taxed desperate refugees for every breath they took. Sitting right at the head poker table, surrounded by a stack of dirty cash, loaded dice, and 3 local tavern girls, was a massive young man in a torn clerical collar. Kale leaned forward slightly, gesturing down toward Thomas below. He was cheating shamelessly at cards, flirting loudly, and taking heavy gulps from a pewter pitcher. The militia mercenaries were furious, but they kept buying his drinks because Thomas had a trick they couldn't resist. Every time his pitcher ran dry, he would pour plain, muddy well water into it, cup his huge hands over the rim, and channel his nen. Transmutation, that was his hatsu, water to wine. He could alter the chemical properties, taste, and alcohol density of plain water, turning river sludge into high-proof vintage wine in a matter of seconds. I thought he was just a fallen blacklist hunter, Kale continued with a faint smile. A guy who turned his nen talent into a racket to drink fine booze for free, flirt with tavern maids, and line his pockets with dirty gambling money. The town called him the corrupt priest, a holy man who lied, cheated, stole, and sold miracle wine for cold hard cash. But then the militia boss brought in a group of captured local kids, orphans they intended to sell to off-continent labor brokers. Kale's eyes narrowed slightly as the memory deepened. The moment those children walked in, Thomas set his cards down. The sleazy grin completely disappeared from his face. He stood up, grabbed his heavy jug of transmuted wine, and splashed it straight into the militia captain's face, before striking a spark with his thumbnail. High-proof alcohol erupted into a wall of flame. He didn't use flashy tactics after that. He used raw, terrifying enhancement backed by years of blacklist hunter combat experience. He broke jaws with his bare fists, smashed heavy oak tables over their heads, and cleared out 12 armed men in under 3 minutes. When the dust settled, Thomas didn't touch the gold for himself. He scooped up the cash from the poker table, handed every last jenny to the orphans, and escorted them out of the territory. The heart behind the vices. So the greed, the drinking, the flirting, I asked. Oh, he genuinely loves wine, money, and women, Kale chuckled softly. Make no mistake, Thomas is a rogue through and through. He'll gamble with black market traders, flirt with any woman who smiles his way, and charge ridiculous fees to local thugs for his transmuted wine. But every single jenny he hustles, steals, or wins goes directly into buying grain, coal, and medicine for these children. He acts corrupt so the monsters of Meteor City think he's just another scoundrel they can deal with, rather than a threat. Down in the courtyard below, Father Thomas suddenly paused. He took one last swig from his wine bottle, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and turned his head toward the heavy iron front gates. The heavy thud of combat boots outside had stopped. A loud, mocking bang echoed through the steel doors as someone smashed the butt of a shotgun against the metal. "Hey, holy man!" a raspy voice roared from the alleyway. "Open up, Gaston's remnant crew is collecting the winter tax." Father Thomas didn't flinch. He set his wine bottle down carefully on a stone ledge, reached behind the altar to grab his massive, iron-reinforced brass candlestick, and flashed a broad, dangerous grin. "Tax day," Thomas muttered, cracking his neck with a deafening pop. "My favorite day to cheat the collectors." January 1988, St. Jude's Sanctuary, Sector 8. The distant rhythmic thud of heavy combat boots echoed down the concrete alleyway outside, but inside the choir loft, Cale didn't rush to draw his sword. He leaned back against the dusty stone balustrade, watching Father Thomas in the courtyard below. The giant priest was currently downing a generous swig of dark red wine straight from a glass bottle, winking at two teenage girls who had brought him a basket of laundry, before hoisting a massive iron beam onto his shoulder like it weighed nothing. "You called him a corrupt priest earlier," I murmured, keeping my voice low. "And an ex-hunter. I know he loves his liquor, money, and flirting with pretty local women. But under all that greed and sleaze, he's genuinely kind-hearted. How did you two first cross paths?" Cale let out a soft, dry chuckle, a rare, genuine sound from him. "Because Thomas wears his vices like armor," Cale said softly, his dark eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight from the altar below. "He lets the world think he's just a greedy, wine-drunk degenerate. I met him all the way back in 1975, 13 years ago, when I was tracking a rogue Nen user through the southern borderlands." Cale's tale, Jewel Miracles in the Dust. "It was the spring of '75, Cale began, his tone shifting into that quiet, measured rhythm he used when recalling the distant past. "I had been pursuing a syndicate hitman into a lawless border town. I walked into a noisy, smoke-filled gambling den run by a local militia that taxed desperate refugees for every breath they took. Sitting right at the head poker table, surrounded by stacks of dirty cash, loaded dice, and 3 local tavern girls, was a massive young man in a torn clerical collar." Cale leaned forward slightly, gesturing down toward Thomas below. He was cheating shamelessly at cards, flirting loudly, and taking heavy gulps from a pewter pitcher. The militia mercenaries were furious, but they kept buying his drinks because Thomas had a trick they couldn't resist. Every time his pitcher ran dry, he would pour plain, muddy well water into it, cup his huge hands over the rim, and channel his nen. Water to wine, that was his first hatsu. He could alter the chemical properties, taste, and alcohol density of plain water, turning river sludge into high-proof vintage wine in a matter of seconds. Nen user dossier, THOMAS. Nen type, transmuter, specialization. HATSU1, water to wine. Transmutes plain, muddy water into fine vintage wine and alcohol. Used for bartering, trade, and funding the sanctuary. HATSU2, wine to water. The sacred sacrificial burden. Absorbs kinetic, chemical, or internal damage from another person's body, and purifies it back into water, transferring the entire physical trauma, poison, and wounds directly into Thomas's own body. I thought he was just a fallen blacklist hunter, Cale continued with a faint smile. A guy who turned his Nen talent into a racket to drink fine booze for free, flirt with tavern maids, and line his pockets with dirty gambling money. The town called him the corrupt priest, a holy man who lied, cheated, stole, and sold miracle wine for cold hard cash. But then the militia boss brought in a group of captured local kids, orphans they intended to sell to off-continent labor brokers. Cale's eyes narrowed slightly as the memory deepened. The moment those children walked in, Thomas set his cards down. The sleazy grin completely disappeared from his face. One of the militia captains struck a child across the face, shattering the boy's jaw. Thomas didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and placed his huge hand over the child's face, activating his second, secret hatsu, wine to water. Cale pointed a thumb down at Thomas's broad chest. His hatsu doesn't just transmute drinks, Ren. Wine to water is a sacred, painful sacrifice. It takes another person's blood, broken bones, and suffering, their bitter wine, and purifies their body completely back into clean water. But the condition is brutal. All of that damage is transferred directly into Thomas's own body. Before my eyes, the child's shattered jaw snapped back into place instantly. And Thomas's own cheek bruised dark purple, his lip splitting open as he absorbed the fracture himself. He didn't scream, he just wiped the blood from his mouth, smiled at the boy, and used raw, terrifying enhancement backed by years of Blacklist Hunter combat experience to clear the room. He broke jaws with his bare fists, smashed heavy oak tables over their heads, and cleared out 12 armed men in under 3 minutes, all while fighting through the agony of a transferred injury. When the dust settled, Thomas didn't touch the gold for himself. He scooped up the cash from the poker table, handed every last jenny to the orphans, and escorted them out of the territory. The heart behind the vices. So the greed, the drinking, the flirting, I asked softly. Oh, he genuinely loves wine, money, and women, Cale chuckled quietly. Make no mistake, Thomas is a rogue through and through. He'll gamble with black market traders, flirt with any woman who smiles his way, and charge ridiculous fees to local thugs for his transmuted alcohol. But every single jenny he hustles, steals, or wins goes directly into buying grain, coal, and medicine for these children. And whenever Sister Elena can't save a child with bandages, Thomas quietly steps into the back room and uses wine to water to absorb the kid's terminal fever, infection, or broken bones into his own flesh. That's why he drinks so much wine, to numb the constant, agonizing pain of 32 kids' injuries living inside his body. Down in the courtyard below, Father Thomas suddenly paused. He took one last swig from his wine bottle, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and turned his head toward the heavy iron front gates. The heavy thud of combat boots outside had stopped. A loud, mocking bang echoed through the steel doors as someone smashed the butt of a shotgun against the metal. "Hey, holy man!" a raspy voice roared from the alleyway. "Open up, Gaston's remnant crew is collecting the winter tax." Father Thomas didn't flinch. He set his wine bottle down carefully on a stone ledge, reached behind the altar to grab his massive, iron-reinforced brass candlestick, and flashed a broad, dangerous grin despite the faded surgical scars covering his chest. "Tax day," Thomas muttered, cracking his neck with a deafening pop. "My favorite day to cheat the collectors." Chapter 86 Summary and Status. Title: The Sacred Transmutation. Location: St. Jude's Sanctuary. Reveal: Thomas's Jewel Hatsu, water to wine, and wine to water. Threat: Gaston's remnant gang demanding tax at the Iron Gates. Chapter 87 High Ground Sanctuary. The heavy oak and iron doors of St. Jude's groaned as Father Thomas unlatched the massive locking bar with a sharp, metallic clank. Down below, the giant priest stepped squarely into the frame, his iron-reinforced brass candlestick resting casually over one broad shoulder. Up in the choir loft, Cale gave me a silent nod. Without a word, we melted back into the shadows of the rafters. Using the reinforced stone pillars for leverage, I surged upward, tapping into a light thread of aura to boost my jump. Cale moved like a ghost beside me, his cane resting lightly across his back. We slipped out through the high stained glass clerestory windows, scaling the steep slate roof of the chapel until we reached the flat stone ledge of the bell tower. From here, the entire alleyway was laid out below us like a chessboard. The courtyard trap. 16 men lined the narrow alley. Gaston's remnant crew hadn't come for a peaceful negotiation. They were heavily armed, carrying sawed-off shotguns, rusty broadswords, and crude Nen-infused knuckle dusters. Standing at the front was a scarred, hulking brute wearing a stained leather vest, gnawing on a toothpick. "Look at this," the thug spat, eyeing Thomas up and down. "The holy beggar himself. Gaston's gone, father. The territory's open for bids, and we're taking our cut of St. Jude's winter stash first." "Is that so, Boris?" Thomas chuckled, taking a long, leisurely swig from his glass bottle of wine before setting it down on the stone archway. "You know, back in my blacklist days, men like you usually paid me to look the other way. Now you come knocking on my door, waking up the children, interrupting my afternoon drink." Thomas cracked his neck, his aura flaring in a sudden, golden burst of enhancement. The heavy air around the gate visibly vibrated. "You're making me very un-Christian," Thomas grinned, his eyes gleaming with dangerous delight. "Light him up," Boris roared, raising his shotgun. "Rain from above." "Now, Ren," Kale whispered beside me, his thumb clearing the guard of his cane sword with a quiet click. I didn't wait. Channeling my aura, I thrust my hands toward the mouth of the alleyway and invoked my primary defensive Nen. Oakhhaven Aegis. Dense, green-gold energy burst forth from the stone roof, expanding rapidly into a towering, intertwined barrier of ethereal hardwood roots and shimmering shields. The barrier slammed down right between Father Thomas and the thug's firing line. Boom, boom, boom. Shotgun pellets and crude Nen blasts slammed harmlessly into the dense canopy of Oakhhaven Aegis, scattering sparks across the snow. The thugs stumbled back, blinded by the sudden wall of ethereal oak that had sprouted from thin air. "What the hell?" Boris yelled, scrambling backward. "An ambush." "From above, you idiots!" Kale's voice cut through the cold air. Before the gang could reorient their weapons, Kale dropped straight down from the bell tower. He landed softly on top of the Oakhhaven Aegis barrier, his cane sword drawn in a flash of blinding silver. With two swift, precise strikes of his blade's flat side, he disarmed the two lead riflemen, sending their guns spinning into the snowdrifts. I dropped down right beside him, landing on the cobblestones with my aura surging, ready to support Thomas and lock down the remaining men. Behind the wooden wall of my Aegis, Father Thomas let out a booming laugh that echoed through the alley. "Now that's what I call divine intervention," Thomas roared, hefting his massive brass candlestick like a two-handed warhammer. "Kale, Ren, leave Boris for me. He owes me for a bottle of 72 vintage he stole last month." Combat positioning, SECTOR 8 alley. Frontline, Ren's Oakhhaven Aegis. Frontline, Father Thomas. Flank, control, Kale. Enemy force, Boris plus 13 remnant thugs. With Oakhhaven Aegis locking down the alley choke point and Kale's silver blade blinding the rear guard, Boris's men panicked. What was supposed to be a soft raid on an isolated church had turned into a total tactical nightmare. "Hold the line," Boris screamed, his face red with rage as he tried to pump another heavy shell into his shotgun. "There's only 3 of them." He never finished the sentence. With a deafening THOOM, Father Thomas stepped around the glowing timber boundary of my Aegis. He didn't just walk, he charged like a runaway freight train, his body coated in a thick, shimmering layer of raw enhancement aura. CLANG boom. Thomas swung his iron-reinforced brass candlestick in a wide, terrifying arc. The impact caught Boris squarely in his chest plate, sending the 200-pound brute flying backward through the air. Boris slammed into 3 of his own men, taking them down like bowling pins in the snow. Precision execution. While Thomas drew the brunt of their panic, Kale and I swept through the flanks. Kale moved with terrifying, silent efficiency. He didn't even draw blood, his cane sword struck with calculated precision, tapping pressure points, shattering rifle stocks, and disarming thugs before they could even locate his position in the falling snow. I kept my Oakhaven Aegis active with my right hand, using micro-expansions of the barrier to slam disoriented gang members into the brick walls whenever they tried to circle around Kale. With my left hand, I channeled a dense thread of aura into my palms, catching two knife-wielding thugs who broke through. Pat. I struck both men in the chest with quick palm strikes, using precise Ru control to knock the wind clean out of their lungs. They crumpled into the snow, gasping for air. In under 90 seconds, the alleyway went dead silent. Combat result: St. Jude's Alleyway. Engagement time: 1 minute, 24 seconds. Casualties: 0. Enemy status: 14 neutralized, unconscious, 2 fled into Sector 8. Defensive integrity: Oakhaven Aegis, 100% intact. The victory and the aftermath. Boris lay groaned in the snow, his shotgun shattered into 3 pieces beside him. Father Thomas stomped over, resting the heavy brass candlestick on Boris's chest with enough weight to keep the brute pinned to the frozen ground. Thomas reached down into Boris's coat, pulled out a thick leather pouch of stolen Jenny bills, and casually weighed it in his hand before tossing it to me. A little contribution to St. Jude's food fund, Thomas smirked, wiping a drop of sweat from his forehead. Consider it your winter tax, Boris. Up on the chapel roof, the small stained glass window creaked open. A dozen tiny heads, Leo, Karen, Jax, Gideon, and the younger kids, peeked out, their eyes wide with awe. When they saw the entire gang lying unconscious in the snow while Thomas, Kale, and I stood untouched at the gate, a sudden, deafening cheer erupted from the choir loft. They did it, little Toby yelled from behind the sandbags. Father Thomas and the hunter guys beat M. Sister Elena stepped out through the main courtyard doors, holding a tub of warm water and clean rags. She looked at the beaten thugs, then up at Kale and me, letting out a long, heavy sigh of immense relief. You 3 boys, Elena murmured, shaking her head with a faint, beautiful smile returning to her tired face. Always making so much noise before breakfast. Kale sheathed his cane sword with a quiet click, turning to look at me as the morning sun finally broke through the heavy smoke clouds over Meteor City. Not a bad warm-up, Ren, Kale said softly. The sanctuary is safe. For now, I replied, feeling the deep, unbreakable strength of my reconciled soul humming smoothly beneath my coat. Now let's go inside and get these kids a real meal. Chapter 87 Summary and Status. Location: St. Jude's Sanctuary. Event: Gaston's remnant crew decisively defeated in under 2 minutes. Outcome: St. Jude's secured, stolen funds reclaimed for orphanage supplies. Current status: Sanctuary morale at all-time high. Ren, Kale and Thomas victorious. Chapter 88, The Bet That I Hate to Win. April 1988, St. Jude's Sanctuary, Sector 8. For 3 long months, St. Jude's Sanctuary existed in a state of delicate, calculated survival. The rule was simple, set by me using every piece of future knowledge I possessed: 0 involvement with the Phantom Troop. Stay neutral, keep quiet. We divided the labor into our ironclad system. Father Thomas and Sister Elena managed the shelter's interior, maintaining rations, morale, and caring for the 32 children. I handled the perimeter and structural defense, using micro-expansions of Oakhaven Aegis to fortify weak points in the stone walls, reinforce the iron gates, and erect silent barrier traps around Sector 8's borders. Kale took the outer detail, scouting the war zone daily, tracking gang movements, and neutralizing external threats before they ever reached our neighborhood. A daily cigarette and a dangerous wager. Because Kale was out in the smoldering wastes alone every single day, he and Thomas started a new daily wager. Every morning before Kale slipped out through the iron gates, Thomas would hand him a single, crumpled cigarette. The rules are simple, "You stubborn old bastard," Thomas would grumble, lighting his own smoke. "If you run into trouble out there that you can't handle alone, you fire a red flare and call for help. If you call me for help, I win the bet, and you owe me a full pack of luxury cigarettes. If you make it back without calling for help, I lose, and I give you another smoke tomorrow." For nearly 90 days, Thomas lost that bet every single morning. Kale always returned silently at dusk, uninjured, tapping his cane against the cobblestones, taking his free cigarette with a dry, refined smirk. Until the very end of the 3rd month. The red flare over District 4. It was a cold, foggy evening in late April. The 32 kids were inside the nave finishing dinner, and I was checking the perimeter resonance of my Oakhaven Aegis near the front gate. Suddenly, a sharp, crimson streak cut through the grey smog over the northern skyline of District 4. Screech boom. A red signal flare burst over the ruined industrial sector, dyeing the heavy fog a deep, blood-colored hue. Father Thomas froze mid-stride in the courtyard, a crate of canned grain slipping from his hands and slamming onto the cobblestones. He stared up at the red light in total, stunned disbelief. His face, usually full of loud arrogance and roguish charm, went completely pale. He pulled a crushed cigarette from his pocket, his massive, scarred hands trembling violently as he tried, and failed, to light it. "That bastard," Thomas whispered, his voice cracking into a raw, terrifying murmur. He fired the flare. He turned to look at me, his sharp eyes filled with a hollow, sickening dread. "Ren. Go," Thomas rasped, grabbing me by the shoulders with enough force to bruise. "Go to District 4 right fucking now. It's the bet. It's the one bet I hate to win." Into the web. I didn't waste a single millisecond. I dropped into a full, high-speed sprint, pushing my aura down into my boots and leaping across the rooftops of Meteor City like a dark comet. Kale fired a flare. The man who had survived decades as a high-tier hunter, the man whose ten and shoe were virtually flawless, the man who had fought through border wars without taking a scratch, he had explicitly called for help. "Hold on, Kale," I screamed internally, my chest tightening with an overwhelming, icy panic. "Don't you dare die, don't you dare." I cleared 3 miles of smoldering trash heaps in under 4 minutes, my N flaring out to its maximum 20-meter boundary as I slammed onto the roof of an abandoned textile factory in District 4. The moment my N touched the ground below, my blood turned to pure ice. Down in the muddy, rain-slicked courtyard of the factory, Kale was leaning heavily on his silver cane, his suit torn, blood dripping steadily from his left arm onto the dark mud. His cane sword was drawn, humming with desperate, high-frequency aura. Surrounding him in a slow, casual triangle were 3 figures. To his left stood a massive, muscular man with a barbaric aura radiating pure physical violence, Uvogan. To his right, a sharp-eyed man in a dark samurai gi resting his hand casually on the hilt of a katana, Nobunaga. And standing directly in front of Kale, wearing a dark trench coat with a reversed cross shaved into his dark hair, watching Kale with cold, analytical, emotionless eyes. Crollo Lusilfa. "You're remarkably skilled for a stray hunter wandering around our backyard," Crollo said softly, his calm, pleasant voice echoing through the silent, dead courtyard. Your blade technique is refined. It's almost a shame. Uvogan cracked his knuckles, a terrifying, bloodthirsty grin splitting his face. Can I break his other arm now, boss? Up on the roof, hidden in the shadows, my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped beast. Kale. There was no time to calculate odds, no time to weigh the risk of breaking our neutral stance. Every second Kale stood bleeding in front of Crollo, Uvogan, and Nobunaga was a second closer to his execution. I slammed both hands onto the edge of the brick roof, pumping almost half of my remaining aura pool straight through the mortar and into the courtyard below. Oakhaven Aegis, maximum canopy. Boom. The ground between Kale and the three spiders detonated upward in a violent, blinding eruption of thick, petrified hardwood roots and dense, golden-green nen barriers. The sheer kinetic shockwave blew clouds of wet mud and shattered concrete 40 feet into the air. MAXIMUM output HATSU deployment. Technique, Oakhaven Aegis. Structure, 360-degree hemispherical root fortress. Integrity, peak structural density. Duration, approximately 45 seconds under high-stress assault. The wall drops. What the? Uvogan's booming voice roared as a massive, 4-foot-thick trunk of nen-infused timber shot up directly in front of his face, blocking his sightline. Before Nobunaga could draw his katana or Crollo could even react, the Oakhaven Aegis fully expanded, wrapping around Kale in a spherical, impenetrable dome of ethereal oak and woven roots, sealing him off from the troop entirely. I dropped from the rooftop like a stone, crashing through the upper layers of the Aegis's canopy and landing heavily beside Kale inside the dark, protected interior of the wooden fortress. Huff, huff. Kale was on one knee, his left arm hanging at an unnatural angle, blood slicking his gray hair. His silver cane sword was still clutched tightly in his right hand. He looked up at me through blurred, pain-filled eyes, letting out a weak, coughing laugh. Ren, he rasped, his breath rattling in his chest. You idiot, I told you. Stay low. Shut up, I said, my hands trembling as I hauled his right arm over my shoulder, feeling the staggering weight of his exhaustion. Thomas lost his damn cigarette. We're going home. Thump. The entire wooden wall behind us shuddered violently. Dust and splintered bark rained down on us. Outside, Uvogan had already thrown his first strike into the barrier. Hey, what kind of Hatsu is this? Uvogan's voice echoed through the thick timber, laced with pure excitement. It didn't shatter, boss, this thing is tough. An Enhancer-Conjurer hybrid barrier, Kralo's calm, detached voice sounded from the other side, sounding horribly close. High structural density. Whoever deployed this possesses remarkable nen efficiency. Nobunaga, don't let them escape through the roof. Seconds to live. Ren, Kale whispered, clutching my collar with bloody fingers. They were tracking Gaston's old weapons shipment. I stumbled right into them. Crollo didn't even draw a weapon. Uvogan broke my arm in one hit. Save your breath, I growled, looking up at the roof of the Aegis. The Oakhaven Aegis could take a pounding, but against Uvogan's raw physical force and Kralo's tactical genius, this wall wouldn't hold for more than 30 seconds. I channeled my remaining aura into my boots, bracing myself to jump through the rear canopy toward the dark residential ruins behind the factory. Crack! A spiderweb of massive fractures split through the main oak trunk as Uvogan slammed his fist into it a second time. Hold on tight, Kale, I muttered, my heart hammering against my ribs. We're making a run for it. Escape required. Before I could spring upward through the rear canopy, the heavy air outside shifted. Two fresh, formidable Nen signatures materialized at the perimeter of the factory grounds, completely sealing off our escape route through the residential ruins. Through the cracks in the splintering timber, I caught sight of them. Shalnik, holding his antenna-equipped phone with a relaxed, cheerful smirk. And walking beside him, her long coat fluttering in the ash-laden wind, carrying her revolver with lazy precision. Pakunoda. Reinforcements arrived. PHANTOM troop. New contacts, Pakunoda and Shalnik. Encirclement, 360-degree total lockdown. Threat assessment, APOCALYPTIC level. Well, Shalnik chuckled, tapping his phone against his chin. Yuvo, Nobunaga, what's with the giant wooden ball? Did someone build a fortress in the middle of our patrol? Some stray rat dropped it from the roof, Nobunaga grunted, his hand resting on his katana hilt as he circled the rear. They're trapped inside. My blood ran instantly cold. Every nerve in my body screamed in pure, absolute terror. Pakunoda. It wasn't Yuvogan's terrifying physical strength or Kralo's unpredictable stolen hatsu that terrified me the most in this exact millisecond. It was her. If Pakunoda so much as touched my shoulder or shot me with a memory bomb, she wouldn't just read my tactical thoughts, she would pull out everything. My knowledge of the future, the fate of the Phantom Troop, the Chimera Ants, Greed Island, my origin. My entire life's deepest secrets would be laid completely bare to Krolo Lucifer. If she got into my head, St. Jude's, Kale, Thomas, Elena, and all 32 kids were as good as dead. A desperate pact in the dark. Ren, Kale breathed, his voice barely a whisper against my ear as he felt the sudden surge of cold sweat drenching my skin. What is it? I leaned down close to Kale's ear, my fingers digging into the fabric of his jacket with frantic, unyielding intensity. Kale, listen to me, I hissed, my voice trembling with a dark, ruthless desperation he had never heard from me before. If the wooden wall falls, if we can't break out, that woman with the revolver cannot touch either of us. Under any circumstances, she is the most dangerous person in this courtyard. Kale's bloodshot eyes widened slightly in confusion. How do you know? He started to ask, his brow furrowing as he looked at me. He stopped himself mid-sentence. He saw the sheer, unadulterated gravity in my eyes, the absolute, terrifying certainty that had guided us through every crisis for the past 6 years. He swallowed the blood in his mouth, a grim, resolute understanding washing over his pale face. Okay, Kale murmured softly, his grip tightening around his cane sword until his knuckles turned ghost white. Understood. Crack boom. A massive fist exploded straight through the heart of the Oakhaven Aegis. Sunlight and smoke poured into our wooden sanctuary as Yuvogan tore away a huge chunk of petrified timber with his bare hands, grinning like a demon into the dark interior. Found you, little rats. Yuvogan roared. Chapter 89 Summary and Status. Location, District 4 Factory Ruins. Surrounded by Krolo, Yuvogan, Nobunaga, Pakunoda, Shalnik. Core priority, prevent Pakunoda from establishing physical contact, memory extraction. Situation, Oakhaven Aegis completely breached. Chapter 90, 3 minutes in hell. 3 minutes, 180 seconds. In normal time, 3 minutes is nothing. In a battle against 5 core members of the Phantom Troop, 3 minutes is an absolute, endless eternity of pure, unadulterated torture. The moment my Oakhaven Aegis shattered under Yuvogan's fist, the courtyard dissolved into a slaughterhouse. Boom! Yuvogan charged like a mountain on fire. I shoved Kale behind me, throwing up a localized, micro-instantiation of my Aegis shield just in time. The impact felt like getting hit by a runaway train. The force rattled my teeth, tore through my Nen defenses, and threw me 10 feet backward into the mud. Before I could even catch my breath, Nobunaga's katana flashed in the rain. Clang! Kale intercepted the strike with a desperate, high-frequency parry of his cane sword, but his broken left arm gave out immediately. He spat a mouthful of blood as Nobunaga kicked him squarely in the chest, sending him skidding across the wet cobblestones. Shalnik, don't use your antenna yet, Krollo commanded from the perimeter, his dark eyes analyzing every single micro-movement we made. Watch their rhythm. The absolute rule, never let her touch. It was hell, real, physical, overwhelming hell. I took a brutal, bone-cracking knee strike to the ribs from Uvogan that sent white-hot fire screaming through my nervous system. I took a shallow slash across my shoulder from Nobunaga's blade. I took a surprise Nen-infused kick from Shalnik that nearly fractured my jaw. I absorbed every single blow, using my body as a human shield to keep Kale alive while desperately scanning the perimeter for even a millimeter of an opening. No matter how much pain flooded my senses, my eyes were locked on one person and one person only, Pakunoda. Whenever she took a step toward us, her hand reaching out or her revolver aiming at my shoulder, I went completely erratic. I used desperate, reckless bursts of Oakhaven Aegis, sprouting razor-thin wood barriers out of the mud, not to block Uvogan's monstrous power, but strictly to force Pakunoda to step back. He's overly conscious of Paku, Shalnik noted, his cheerful smile flickering into a sharp, analytical glare. Why is he dodging her specifically? Because he knows, Pakunoda murmured softly, her sharp eyes narrowing as she watched me scramble through the mud to drag Kale away from Nobunaga's sword path. He knows what my hands can do. Enduring the unendurable. Ren, Kale gasped, his face completely covered in rain and blood as I hoisted him up by his collar yet again. Leave me. You can. Leap the wall. Shut up, I screamed through clenched, bloody teeth, coughing up dark crimson onto my coat. We both leave, or neither of us does. 2 minutes and 40 seconds in. My aura was running on absolute fumes. My ribs were shattered, my vision was blurring at the edges, and my muscles burned like they were being eaten by acid. Every single second felt like being flayed alive in the lowest ring of hell. We were completely outmatched, totally surrounded, and beaten to a pulp. The gap to run simply wasn't there. They were testing us, breaking us down piece by piece before moving in for the final kill or capture. That's enough, Krollo said softly, taking a single, casual step forward as the 3-minute mark struck. The temperature in the courtyard plummeted to absolute zero. Kale, I rasped through a chest full of broken ribs, my teeth stained dark with blood. This is a secret, don't ask questions. I didn't wait for his reply. Driven past my physical limits, I unleashed the full power of my Hatsu, the Chronicle of the Departed, Reso copy. A blinding, spectral surge of aura exploded outward from my body, resonating with a violent, overwhelming pressure that caught all 5 spiders completely off guard. Specialist HATSU activation, RESSO copy. Effect: high-density phantom aura projection and spatial resonance. Impact: forced immediate defensive stance from all 5 spiders. Window of tension: approximately 8 seconds. Boom! I lunged forward into a desperate, high-speed assault, weaving spatial shockwaves into every strike. For a brief, wild 10 seconds, the sheer shock value of my hidden power forced Uvogan back on his heels, made Nobunaga jump clear, and forced Crollo to deploy an aura defense to evaluate the threat. For a tiny fraction of a moment, we took the upper hand. The table turns again. But 5 against 2 is a cruel math equation in the hunter world. Within seconds, Crollo's cold eyes analyzed the output limit of my aura. Impressive resonance, Crollo noted calmly, stepping back. Yuvo, flank left. Nobunaga, cut his movement lines. Shalnik, cover Paku. Thud. Yuvogan's massive arm slammed into my side, neutralizing my momentum and sending me crashing violently into the mud beside Kale. The overwhelming pressure of 5 master Nen users reasserted itself like an iron vice. Kale, lying on his side, stared at me in total, wide-eyed shock, his mind thoroughly staggered by the secret Hatsu I had just revealed. But despite his broken body and total exhaustion, his sharp tactical mind kept working. He watched me instinctively place my body between Pakunoda and him every single time she shifted her weight. "It's that woman. Right there," Kale murmured weakly into the mud, his voice barely audible beneath the pounding rain. "She's the key. You're locking onto her because she's the biggest threat to us." He spat out a pool of blood, a terrifyingly sharp, cold glint returning to his eyes. "If an opening is what we need to get out of this hell," Kale whispered, pushing himself up onto one knee with pure, unadulterated willpower, "then I'll make it for you, Ren." Sovereign Thread, Black Symphony. "Kale, no," I yelled, reaching out to grab him, but his aura suddenly changed, shifting from a ragged, dying flame into a razor-sharp, terrifying pitch-black pitch. Kale threw his silver cane sword straight into the air. Sovereign Thread, Black Symphony. Sui Esh. Invisible to the naked eye, thousands of microscopic, ultra-high-density Nen threads erupted from Kale's fingers, weaving through the air like a localized storm of liquid razor wire. The entire courtyard was engulfed in a deafening, metallic hum that vibrated inside the eardrums of everyone present. Kale's ultimate HATSU activation. Technique, Sovereign Thread, Black Symphony. Primary target, Pakunoda. Target status, critical condition. System cost, 100% aura depletion to forced Zetsu mode. Physical damage, severe internal organ strain, system collapse. Paku, fall back, Shalnik shrieked, his cheerful demeanor vanishing instantly as his antenna senses flared in red danger warnings. Nobunaga slashed wildly into the empty air, his katana sparking violently as it collided with the invisible black threads, but he couldn't sever them all. Yuvogan threw a massive punch into the air, but the threads wrapped around his arm, slicing deep into his thick skin and pinning his shoulder in place. Pakunoda raised her revolver, but the high-density threads converged entirely on her, piercing through her aura defense and shredding through her coat in a fraction of a second. Crack splash. "Ah!" Pakunoda gasped, dark blood bursting from her lips as the black threads shredded her chest and abdominal cavity, pinning her violently against the brick wall of the factory. Her revolver clattered to the wet cobblestones as her eyes rolled back, her aura instantly wavering into a critical, life-threatening collapse. "Paku!" Shalnik screamed, dropping his phone to leap toward her bleeding, limp frame. The heavy price. Collapse. The moment the threads unleashed their lethal strike, Kale fell forward like a puppet whose strings had been violently cut. His aura didn't just drain, it vanished completely. His pores closed, his defensive Nen instantly evaporated, and his body slammed face first into the wet cobblestones in absolute, forced Zetsu. Critical status, KAEL. Aura state, forced ZETSU. Physical state, unconscious, severe internal hemorrhaging. Defense, 0%. Kale, I screamed, grabbing his limp, unresisting body and pulling him against my chest. He was pale as a corpse, his heartbeat faint and irregular, accepting a devastating physical toll for over-channeling his ultimate technique. He targeted Paku. Nobunaga growled, his face twisted in absolute fury as he backed off to guard Pakunoda's critical body alongside Crollo. Her vitals are dropping fast, Crollo said, his voice cold and sharp as he placed his hand over Pakunoda's chest, deploying aura to stem her rapid internal bleeding. Shalnik, help her. Yuvo, don't let them. Pakunoda was down, critically wounded and unconscious, and the troop was forced into total chaos trying to keep her alive. The opening Kale bought with his life was wide open.
Chapter 91, The Desperate Bargain. The rain hit the wet cobblestones like tiny lead bullets. I was at the absolute end of the line. Kneeling in the mud, clutching Kale's limp, Zetsu-bound body to my chest, my mind raced in a frantic, terrifying loop. I can't run. I can't carry him. I can't defeat 5 spiders. We are going to die right here. My shattered ribs burned like fire, and my vision turned black at the edges. Think, stupid, think. How do we get out of this? Then, a crazy, desperate thought struck me. A bargain. I possessed the Chronicle of the Departed, Reso copy. Through its empathic resonance, I could channel and replicate an aura signature I knew intimately. I could copy Father Thomas's secret second Hatsu, wine to water, the sacrificial healing ability that absorbs another person's deadly trauma, damage, and blood loss, purifying their body at the expense of taking the physical strain onto the user. If I used it, I could heal Pakunoda's life-threatening hemorrhaging right now and stabilize Kale's internal bleeding at the exact same time. If I do this, I reveal my deepest secret card to Crollo Lucifer. But showing my hand is better than dying in the mud. I forced my blood-soaked lungs to intake air, raised my trembling hand, and shouted over the sound of the rain. Wait, how about a bargain? The spider leader's terms. The courtyard went dead silent. Shalnik, who was desperately trying to stem Pakunoda's bleeding, froze. Nobunaga's grip tightened on his sword, his eyes burning with hatred. Yuvogan took a half-step forward, cracking his knuckles with a sound like snapping timber. Crollo slowly turned his head to look at me, his dark eyes entirely devoid of emotion. A bargain? Crollo said softly, his voice cutting through the storm. Your companion just nearly killed Paku. And now you stand there, on the verge of death, offering a deal to save her. I can save her, I screamed, spitting out a mouthful of blood. I can heal her internal injuries right now, before her heart stops. But you let us walk out of here alive? Crollo stared at me for a long, heavy 3 seconds. He looked down at Pakunoda's pale, bloodless face, then back at me. No, that is not enough, Crollo replied coldly. A faint, unsettling glint flickered in his eyes. However, if you can truly heal Paku from a state of near death while maintaining high-tier defensive barriers, you possess an extraordinarily versatile set of abilities. I find myself quite interested in owning them. He paused, tilting his head slightly. Save Paku's life right now. Let me have your ability. Do that, and I will leave the 2 of you alone. The 4 conditions. My heart stopped in my chest. Wait, what? He wants to steal my ability? My mind panicked, instinctively pulling up the exact, terrifying rules of Crollo's Hatsu. I knew the secret mechanics of Bandit's Secret better than anyone. Bandit's Secret. Conditions for theft. 1. Crollo must witness the Nen ability in action with his own eyes. 2. He must ask questions about the Nen ability and be answered by the victim. 3. The victim's palm must touch the handprint on the front cover of the book. 4. All of the above conditions must be completed within 1 hour. If I agree, I lose my specialist copy ability forever. But if I don't, Kale and I die in the next 30 seconds. I had no choice. 0. Fine, I yelled through clenched teeth, my voice shaking. I agree. Just keep your word and leave us alone. Bring her over here. Krollo didn't hesitate. He gestured to Shalnik, who carefully carried Pakunoda's limp, heavily bleeding body over and laid her down on the mud beside Kale. The sacrificial resonance. Krollo conjured a thick, leather-bound book with a red handprint on the cover, Bandit's Secret. He opened it with his left hand while watching me with wide, unblinking eyes. What is the nature of the ability you are about to use? Krollo asked, initiating condition number 2. It's an empathic resonance. I gasped, swallowing my own blood. It allows me to copy and channel the sacrificial Hatsu wine to water, taking the target's physical damage and absorbing it into myself. I see, Krollo murmured calmly, fulfilling the condition as he watched me closely. Place your palm on the cover. I raised my right hand, trembling violently, and slammed my palm directly onto the red handprint of Bandit's Secret. A strange, hollow sensation tore through my soul, as if a thread of my very identity was being forcibly unraveled and bound into the paper. Without missing a beat, I placed my left hand over Pakunoda's torn chest and my right hand over Kale's blood-soaked torso, driving my specialist aura to its absolute limit. The Chronicle of the Departed, Reso copy, wine to water. Flash. A soft, brilliant golden light erupted from my palms. Because my remaining aura was nearly depleted and I was splitting the sacrificial absorption between 2 people at once, I couldn't grant either of them a full, total recovery. But it was enough. Before Krollo and Shalnark's very eyes, Pakunoda's deep, lethal arterial hemorrhaging began to close. Her gasping, ragged breaths smoothed out into a steady, quiet rhythm, her vitals stabilizing out of the red zone. Beside her, Kale's internal organ bleeding ceased, his weak heartbeat strengthening instantly. Simultaneously, the brutal mental, physical strain of 2 people's life-threatening injuries slammed straight into my own body. Crack splurt. Blood burst from my mouth and nose. My vision flared in blinding white agony as my consciousness shattered completely under the weight of the double absorption. The price paid. My legs gave out. I collapsed face first into the mud between Pakunoda and Kale, completely immobilized, my aura pool emptied down to absolute 0. Pakunoda remained unconscious, but her breathing was safe and stable. Beside me, Kale's eyes slowly fluttered open. Through his heavy, pain-filled blur, he had witnessed the entire monstrous transaction, the book, the handprint, the sacrificial golden light, and the horrific sacrifice I had just made to buy our lives. Krollo quietly closed Bandit's Secret with a sharp snap. A new page had materialized inside, bearing my likeness and my ability. A deal is a deal, Krollo said softly, turning his back on us. Shalnik, Karipaku, we are leaving. The 5 spiders melted back into the yellow fog of District 4, leaving us alone in the quiet, rain-slicked courtyard. Kale lay in the mud, staring at my bleeding, motionless form with trembling, horrified eyes. Ren, Kale rasped, his voice cracking with unbearable grief and confusion as he reached out a weak, Zetsu-bound hand toward me. What did you just do? 30 minutes after the spiders vanished into the yellow fog, the heavy thud of frantic footsteps echoed through the ruined factory courtyard. Father Thomas arrived like a hurricane, his massive brass candlestick splattered with rainwater, his face twisted in absolute terror. When he saw Kale lying in the mud clutching my cold, blood-soaked body, the giant priest dropped to his knees, scooping us both into his arms without a word and rushing us back towards St. Jude's. For 48 agonizing hours, I lay completely motionless on the stone table in the church nave, floating in a dark, empty void. The awakening. When my eyes finally fluttered open 2 days later, the quiet warmth of flickering altar candles greeted my blurry vision. My ribs were tightly bandaged, and the burning pain in my chest had dulled into a heavy, throbbing ache. Sitting on a wooden stool right beside my cot was Kale. His 12-hour forced zetsu had long passed, but he looked hollowed out, pale, dark circles beneath his eyes, staring at his trembling hands in absolute silence. Kale, I rasped, my throat dry as sandpaper. Kale snapped his head up, his dark eyes instantly locking onto mine with immense, overflowing relief. Ren, God, you're awake. I looked down at my hands. I reached deep inside my soul, trying to summon even the faintest thread of aura, trying to feel the familiar, comforting hum of my specialist power. Nothing. A vast, echoing emptiness filled my chest. I let out a long, heavy breath, looking up at Kale with a tired, quiet smile. Kale, I'm sorry, I murmured softly. It feels like I can't use Nen anymore. My ability is gone. Kale's knuckles turned white as he clenched his fists, his jaw tightening in agonizing guilt. Before you ask, I continued, keeping my voice low so only he could hear, I know about Crollo and the Phantom Troop's abilities because of research I did before coming to Meteor City. The book, the conditions, their Hatsu. I know how they operate. Just don't ask how I know, okay? Kale stared at me for a long, heavy moment. He swallowed the lump in his throat, leaning forward to gently rest his hand over my arm. I won't ask, Ren, Kale said softly, his voice thick with emotion. I don't care how you know. You sacrificed your absolute secret, your very power, to buy my life. Don't you ever apologize to me again. He stood up, his gaze turning resolute and sharp. And don't worry, Kale added, a cold, protective glint returning to his eyes. We're going to figure this out. You're not staying in this war zone without a Hatsu. I've already made contact using my old Blacklist Hunter network. 5 elite hunters are arriving at Sector 8's border tonight to escort us safely out of Meteor City. The farewell at St. Jude's. An hour later, Father Thomas and Sister Elena stood at the iron gates of St. Jude's Sanctuary as Kale and I prepared to leave. The 32 children gathered near the chapel porch, waving quietly from behind the stone pillars. I'm sorry, Thomas, Kale said quietly, pulling his coat tight around his wounded shoulder. We have to leave. Ren's recovery and safety take top priority now. Father Thomas didn't bellow or crack jokes. He looked at Kale, then looked at me, his sharp eyes shining with deep, unpayable gratitude. He reached into his coat, pulled out a full, unopened pack of luxury cigarettes, and jammed it firmly into Kale's coat pocket. You don't owe me an apology, you old bastard, Thomas rasped, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. You two saved this sanctuary. You saved my life, and you saved those kids. I'll take the bet victory, but I'm paying it out in full. Sister Elena stepped forward, placing a small, blessed wooden cross into my palm and squeezing my hand tightly. May God watch over both your paths, Elena whispered gently. Thank you for protecting our home. With a final, silent nod, Kale and I turned away from St. Jude's Sanctuary, melting into the evening mist to meet our hunter escort at the sector line. The secret in the leather book. That very same night, miles away in an abandoned high-rise in District 1. Crollo Lucifer sat alone on a concrete ledge, the cold night wind blowing his dark hair across his forehead. In his lap lay his conjured leather book, Bandit's Secret. He turned to the newest page, the page where my likeness and my ability, the Chronicle of the Departed, Reso copy, had been permanently recorded after all 4 strict conditions had been flawlessly fulfilled. Crollo stared at the page, his brow subtly furrowing in deep, rare confusion. The page was completely, entirely blank. No text describing the rules. No aura flow responding to his command. No Hatsu manifesting when he turned his aura into the paper. It was a hollow, silent husk. Why? Crollo thought, his sharp, analytical mind racing in total perplexity. I witnessed the ability with my own eyes. He answered my questions, his palm touched the handprint. The theft was absolute and successful. So why is the page empty? You cannot steal from the dead. What Crollo Lucifer, and the entire hunter world, did not understand was the true, terrifying nature of my origin. Crollo believed he had stolen a living man's specialist technique. He believed he had taken the water from the well. He didn't realize that my specialist power was not generated by my own soul alone. It was an empathic resonance bound to empowered by 2 post-mortem souls, lingering spirits whose residual nen transcended the physical realm and anchored themselves to my existence. And the absolute, unshakable law of Bandit's secret is simple. Crollo cannot steal or use abilities belonging to the dead. You can take the water, Crollo. But you can never steal the river. My power wasn't stolen. It was merely locked in the deep, dormant shadows of my spirit, waiting for the day I would reclaim it from the grave. Chapter 91 Summary and Status. Location: departing Sector 8, exiting Meteor City. Ren's status: Nen temporarily sealed, escorted out by 5 elite hunters. Kale's status: recovered, serving as Ren's primary guardian. Crollo's status: confused, holds a blank, unusable page in Bandit's secret. Reveal: post-mortem soul resonance renders, reso copy, unstealable. Chapter 92, The Clogged River. May 1988, Hunter Association Headquarters. 1 month had passed since we left the sulphurous wastes of Meteor City behind. My body had completely healed. Thanks to the elite medical facilities at the Hunter headquarters, my broken ribs were reset, my internal hemorrhaging was gone, and physically, I felt as sharp as ever. I could sprint, spar, and dodge with peak reflexes. But beneath my skin, my aura was dead quiet. Every single morning, I sat cross-legged on the floor of my quarters, closing my eyes, trying to feel the familiar, comforting warmth of my specialist spirit. Nothing. It wasn't just Zetsu, it felt like a massive, rusted iron gate had slammed shut inside my soul. The well was dry, the well was locked. A call to the pioneer. While I sat staring at my numb palms, Kale stood by the window, dialing an unlisted, heavily encrypted satellite frequency on his Hunter phone. "Is the connection secure?" Kale muttered, placing the receiver to his ear. A static burst echoed through the speaker, followed by the loud, casual crunching of an apple and a deep, gruff, overly relaxed voice on the other end. Yeah, it's secure. What's got you so stressed out in the middle of the night, Kale?" "It's Ren," Kale said sharply, his voice laced with intense concern. "A month ago in Meteor City, Crollo Lucifer used Bandit's secret on him. His Hatsu was stolen. He hasn't been able to tap into his aura ever since. Is there a way to break a stolen ability contract, or is he permanently neutralized?" On the line, Jing 3CSS let out a loud, booming laugh that nearly blew out the phone's speaker. "Stolen? From that kid? Ha ha ha. Oh man, that Lucifer guy must be losing his mind right about now." Kale's brow furrowed in utter confusion. "Jing, this isn't a joke." His pores are completely closed. "Listen to me, Kale," Jing interrupted, his voice dropping into that sharp, terrifyingly perceptive tone that only the world's top 5 hunters possessed. "Back in 84, when I first observed Ren, I realized something. That boy is an absolute anomaly. Normal people's Nen capacity is like carrying water in a bucket. If someone steals it or drains it, the bucket goes empty." Jing paused, taking another loud bite of his apple. "Ren isn't a bucket. Ren is the river itself. On top of that, he's like 2 rivers flowing in a single stream. Lucifer might have scooped out a bucket of water, but nobody can steal a damn river. His Nen pathways aren't gone, Kale. They're just clogged by the shock of the theft." "The package from Greed Island." "Clogged?" Kale asked, staring over at me. "Exactly," Jing grunted. "If a pipe is clogged, you don't politely unclog it. You blast it open with force. I'm sending you a package via high-priority Hunter courier. It should be at your door in 5 minutes." Before Kale could even reply, a loud knock echoed at our apartment door. Kale opened it to find a courier holding a heavy, metallic briefcase stamped with a glowing Hunter Association crest. Inside was a bulky, customized console system and a single, metallic game card, Greed Island. Tucked inside the console tray was a handwritten note on crumpled, stain-covered paper. "If you succeed, and I know you will, feel free to train on this island. It's got plenty of space to stretch your legs. Enjoy. P.S. Be wary of the rat. Jing." The dangerous choice. Kale set the note down on the table and looked at me with a heavy, serious gaze. "Jing told me what we need to do," Kale said softly, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for his cane. "To break the clog, we have to force your nodes open again. The exact same way an enhancer violently awakens a normal person, by blasting high-density aura directly into your spirit. My eyes widened. Forced awakening. Kale, if my channels are blocked and you blast me with your aura while I'm in this state, it could destroy my nervous system. I know the risks, Kale murmured, his dark eyes locking onto mine with an unshakable, desperate trust. Jing believes your soul can take it. He believes you'll survive it. But it's your choice, Ren. He paused, holding his hand out over my shoulder, his black thread aura beginning to hum quietly at his fingertips. Do you believe in Jing? I looked at the Greed Island card resting on the table, lingering on Ging's warning about Pariston. I looked at my own hands, feeling the silent, dormant river roaring deep beneath the ice of my soul, waiting to be set free. A faint, confident smile finally broke across my face. I looked up at Kale and took a deep, steady breath. Ging's a wild bastard, I whispered, setting my stance firm on the hardwood floor. But he's never been wrong about me yet. Do it, Kale. Blast it open. Chapter 92.5, The Holy Broom. May 1988, St. Jude's Sanctuary, Sector 8. The atmosphere inside St. Jude's Sanctuary was thick enough to cut with a rusted knife. 7 core members of the Phantom Troop, Krollo, Pakunoda, Franklin, Machi, Shalnik, Uvogan, and Nobunaga, walked casually through the archway, their eyes surveying the crowded courtyard. Down by the chapel steps, Father Thomas stood dead still, his heart hammering against his ribs like a sledgehammer. He gripped his massive brass candlestick so hard his knuckles turned ghost white. Cold sweat dripped down his neck. What the hell are they doing here? Thomas thought, his mind racing in total panic. Are they here to finish us off? Krollo walked silently through the shelter, ignoring the giant priest entirely. His face was unreadable, but beneath his calm exterior, a deep, frustrating obsession consumed him. He had spent weeks analyzing the blank, unusable page in Bandit's secret. He couldn't steal the ability. He couldn't command it. It was an anomaly that insulted his intelligence, and he was here seeking answers about the dark-haired boy and the cane-wielding hunter who had vanished into thin air. The spiders fanned out, looking over the refugees, specifically scanning for a 14-year-old black-haired boy and a dark-haired man with a cane. The unstoppable force meets Sister Elena. Franklin reached out a massive, scarred hand toward a wooden bowl of warm broth resting on an outdoor folding table. Smack. A wooden broom handle slammed down hard across Franklin's massive knuckles. The giant, gun-fingered killer blinked in total, stunned silence, pulling his hand back on pure instinct. Hey, Sister Elena barked, resting the straw broom against her hip and glaring up at the giant hulking brute. Wash your hands before you touch the food. Sanitation comes first. Before Franklin could even process being hit with a household cleaning tool, Sister Elena swung the tip of her broom like a stern teacher pointing a ruler, aiming it straight at Nobunaga and Uvogan. And you too, Elena snapped. No stealing rations. Those bread rolls are for the orphans. Uvogan opened his mouth to roar, his jaw dropping in sheer disbelief, while Nobunaga's hand twitched toward his katana hilt. But before a bloodbath could erupt, Pakunoda quietly stepped between him, holding up a hand. Apologies, sister, Pakunoda said softly, her dark eyes narrowing as she gently laid her hand on Sister Elena's shoulder, activating her memory extraction. We are searching for a 13 to 15-year-old black-haired boy. I wonder if he is staying here. The ignorance of pure kindness. Father Thomas, watching from 30 yards away, almost choked on his own breath. Damn it, Thomas screamed internally, his soul leaving his body. If Paku reads her mind, she'll see Ren. She'll see Kale. It's over. Pakunoda's Hatsu reached into Sister Elena's mind, searching for the memory of a dark-haired child who fought like a veteran, possessed a terrifying wooden barrier Hatsu, and carried high-level hunter secrets. Pakunoda blinked, pulling her hand back in faint confusion. Nothing. Sister Elena wiped a strand of graying hair from her forehead, completely unbothered by the memory scan. There are dozens of boys here, Elena said plainly, gesturing toward the 32 orphans running through the courtyard. You can look around all you like, as long as you don't break my sanctuary regulations. And frankly, since you're all standing around doing nothing while my shelter is falling apart, why don't you make yourselves useful with some physical labor? She pointed her trusty broom toward the broken stone perimeter wall. You, the big guy, Elena ordered, looking at Uvogan. You can haul those granite boulders to reinforce the north wall. You with the knife, she pointed at Nobunaga, go chop firewood behind the kitchen. And you, she looked at Pakunoda, can help sweep the mess hall. Silence fell over the courtyard. 7 S-class calamity-level mass murderers stood in a circle, staring at a small, middle-aged woman holding a straw broom. Uvogan, Nobunaga, and Franklin looked at Crollo, then back at Elena, their terrifying faces contorting into awkward, forced compliance. Okay, Uvogan muttered under his breath, sounding like a disgruntled schoolboy forced to do detention as he stomped off toward the pile of heavy stone boulders. Understood, Nobunaga grumbled, gritting his teeth as he headed toward the woodpile with his master-crafted katana. The labor crew. Half an hour later, the courtyard presented the most surreal sight in the history of Meteor City. Uvogan was single-handedly lifting multi-ton stone blocks, stacking them with terrifying precision under Elena's watchful eye. Nobunaga was slicing thick oak logs into perfect, uniform firewood with lightning-fast iijutsu strikes. Franklin was carefully carrying heavy soup cauldrons without spilling a single drop. Over in the corner, Machi and Shalnik were sitting on the wooden porch steps. Shalnik was laughing, letting 3 young orphans braid his blonde hair, while Machi quietly used her nen stitches to mend the torn clothes and small cuts of refugee children who lined up around her. Out by the woodshed, Nobunaga wiped sweat from his brow, chopping his 50th log with a heavy sigh. Boss, Nobunaga grunted, looking over at Crollo, who was quietly wiping down a wooden picnic table with a rag. Why the hell are we doing hard labor right now? Crollo paused, looking down at the rag in his hand, his sharp mind completely failing to calculate a logical answer. I don't know, Crollo replied softly, his voice devoid of its usual dark grandeur. Perhaps, it's the broom? Nobunaga looked over his shoulder at Sister Elena, who was currently sternly correcting Uvogan's wall stacking technique. Nobunaga shuddered slightly. Are you not scared of that woman, boss? Nobunaga muttered. Uvogan walked by carrying a 2-ton pillar, sweating profusely. Yeah, she's terrifying for some reason. Worse than the local warlords. The truth revealed. While the heavy lifters grumbled, Crollo walked over to Pakunoda, who was leaning against the well. Did she really know nothing? Crollo asked softly. The boy was clearly here. His barrier Hatsu was rooted right in this courtyard. She truly doesn't know, Pakunoda murmured, staring at Sister Elena with a strange, solemn respect. Sister Elena helps anyone who walks through those gates. She feeds them, heals them, and immediately forgets her own kindness to focus on the next person in line. She didn't register him as a warrior or a target. Just another hungry child. Pakunoda paused, her eyes flickering with a faint, rare trace of emotion. If I had asked her specifically for the name, Ren, she would have known instantly. But I asked for a threat, and her mind contained zero malice. Safe in the shadows. In the far back of the chapel, hidden behind a tall stained glass pillar, Father Thomas took a long, massive swig from his bottle of wine, wiping cold sweat from his forehead. Holy fuck, Thomas whispered to himself, his chest heaving as he watched Uvogan meekly carry another log for Elena. Poor souls. Even the greatest villains in Meteor City are completely helpless against Sister Elena. As evening fell, the troop finished their assigned chores. The wall was fully repaired, 2 cords of wood were stacked, and the kitchen was spotless. Without a word, the 7 spiders began walking back down the dirt path toward Sector 8's border, their long coats fluttering in the sunset wind. Boss, Shalnik said, hands in his pockets as he looked over at Crollo. In that shelter, only the big priest can use Nen. He's an enhancer, but his output is basic. None of those people are a threat to us. Crollo didn't turn back. He looked down at his right hand, feeling the quiet, empty mystery of the boy who had slipped through his fingers. I know, Crollo replied softly, his voice fading into the evening air. It's fine. Let St. Jude's be. Chapter 92.5 Summary and Status. Location, St. Jude's Sanctuary. Event, Phantom Troop searched St. Jude's, neutralized by Sister Elena's broom. Pakunoda's scan, failed due to Elena's selfless, pure nature. Troop decision, St. Jude's classified as non-threat, sanctuary spared completely. Chapter 92.5 The Inspection. Before the 7 spiders could even step toward the main gates to take their leave, a sharp, rhythmic tap-tap echoed across the stone courtyard. Sister Elena was standing at the threshold of the nave, resting both hands on her wooden broom like a military general inspecting a fresh batch of unruly recruits. She adjusted her reading glasses, her sharp eyes sweeping over the group. "Hold your horses," Sister Elena called out, her voice easily cutting through the evening wind. "Nobody leaves my courtyard without a proper exit inspection. Line up." Father Thomas, still hiding behind the stained glass pillar inside the chapel, nearly choked on his own spit. He frantically made the sign of the cross over his chest, whispering a desperate prayer for Sister Elena's soul. To everyone's absolute shock, and perhaps out of sheer, unexplainable instinct, the 7 S-class mass murderers actually slowed to a halt and formed an awkward, ragged line in front of the chapel steps. The scolding. Sister Elena slowly walked down the line, holding her broom like a drill sergeant's baton. She stopped first in front of Uvogan, who towered over her like a mountain of muscle and wild hair. She looked at the giant stone wall he had spent the last 2 hours stacking, then looked up into his face. "You," Elena began sternly, tapping the broom handle against Uvogan's massive boot. "You have great strength, big boy, but zero finesse. Look at those top stone blocks on the north corner, they're crooked by at least 2 inches. If a heavy rain hits next week, that whole section will slide right off. Use your brain, not just your shoulders." Uvogan, a man who regularly crushed skull bones with his bare knuckles, scratched the back of his neck, staring down at his feet like a scolded middle schooler. "Ah, yeah, sister. Sorry, I'll fix the balance next time." She moved 2 paces to the right, stopping in front of Nobunaga, who was idly resting his hand on the hilt of his prized katana. Tap. Sister Elena tapped the tip of her broom lightly against the sheath of his sword. Nobunaga flinched, his eyes widening in total disbelief. "And you, young man," she scolded, glaring at him over her glasses. "What did I say about carrying exposed weapons near the children? You've been chopping firewood with that long knife all afternoon, showing off. You almost scared little Toby into tears. Keep that thing tucked away when you're in a house of God." Nobunaga opened his mouth to snap that it was a master-crafted katana, but under her unyielding, motherly glare, he quietly pushed his sword further back behind his sash. "Understood, sister," he grumbled, looking away. Next was Franklin. Sister Elena eyed his massive, scarred frame and the stitched metal knuckles on his long fingers. "You," she said, her tone softening slightly, though her gaze remained firm. "Your posture is terrible. Slouching like that while carrying heavy soup pots will ruin your lower back before you're 40. Stand up straight, and wipe your face, you've got soot on your forehead from the kitchen hearth." Franklin blinked his massive eyes, awkwardly using his sleeve to wipe his forehead. "Yes, Mom." She stepped over to Machi and Shalnik. She looked at Machi's glowing, ultra-thin nen stitches, then down at the neatly mended shirts resting on the porch bench. "Your needlework is fast, young lady, I'll give you that," Elena acknowledged, giving Machi a nod. "But your thread tension is far too tight. These clothes will pucker after 2 washes. Loosen your stitch next time." Machi, whose nen threads could slice through solid steel, stared at her own fingers in silent, stunned reflection. "I'll adjust the tension," Machi muttered quietly. Sister Elena then pointed the broom handle directly at Shalnak's smiling face. "And you, Blondie, stop filling the orphans' heads with silly stories about electronic gadgets they can't afford. They need to focus on their reading and arithmetic, not fancy toys. Go wash those dirty hands." Shalnak's cheerful, mischievous smile instantly froze. He raised both hands in surrender, laughing nervously. "Aha, right away, sister. heading to the wash basin now. Finally, Sister Elena walked up to the front of the line, stopping directly before Pakunoda and Crollo. She looked at Pakunoda's slick leather coat and high heels. You're a bright girl, but walking around a dusty war zone in those ridiculous heels is begging for a twisted ankle. Wear sensible boots next time you do charity work. Pakunoda let out a soft, almost imperceptible sigh, looking down at her shoes. I will keep that in mind, sister. The leader's turn. Lastly, Sister Elena stood directly in front of Crollo Lucifer, the leader of the Phantom Troop, a man who had orchestrated massacres, defeated high-ranking hunters, and held the underworld of the entire world in absolute terror, stood calmly in his dark coat, watching the middle-aged woman with quiet, unblinking eyes. Sister Elena looked at Crollo's spotless hands, then at his sharp, dark coat, and finally right into his calm, emotionless eyes. She let out a long, heavy sigh, shaking her head. And as for you, young man, Elena said, her voice dropping into a deep, motherly sorrow that cut deeper than any blade. You carry a dark, heavy shadow on your shoulders. You walk around with your hands in your pockets acting like nothing in this world matters, but your eyes are completely hollow. Crollo's expression didn't change, but his pupils subtly dilated. A boy with a mind as sharp as yours should be using his gifts to build something lasting, not wandering around the ruins wasting his life, Sister Elena said gently, raising her wooden broom to lightly pat his shoulder. Go home, eat a warm meal, and stop carrying so much bitterness inside yourself. The departure. Crollo stood completely still in the center of the courtyard. For the first time in years, the Phantom Leader had nothing to say. No philosophical quotes, no cold tactical commands. Nothing. Sister Elena turned her back on the 7 S-class villains, turning toward the kitchen doors. All right, clear out now. Dinner is in 10 minutes, and none of you are on the meal list. She called out over her shoulder, sweeping a few stray leaves off the porch. The 7 spiders turned and slowly walked out through the heavy iron gates of St. Jude's Sanctuary. Outside on the dirt road, the evening silence was deafening. Boss, Shalnik whispered nervously, glancing back over his shoulder at the peaceful church bell tower. She really gave it to us, didn't she? Yuvogan grunted, rubbing his neck where the broom had tapped his boot. I swear, if she had a Hatsu, she'd be an S-rank threat. Shut up, Yuvo, Nobunaga grumbled, adjusting his sword sash so it was completely hidden beneath his cloak. Just, don't mention this to Finks or Phaeton. Ever. Crollo walked at the head of the group, his hands tucked deep inside his pockets, looking up at the first stars appearing through the smog of Sector 8. A faint, quiet glint flickered in his dark eyes. She is right about one thing, Crollo murmured softly to the night air. What's that, boss? Pakunoda asked gently. The stone wall, Crollo replied, his voice fading into the wind. It really was crooked. Chapter 93, Into the Game. The air in the training hall inside Hunter headquarters was suffocatingly thick with tension. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I was standing in the center of the room, my stance braced, every muscle in my body coiled tight. In front of me stood Kale, his silver cane resting on the floor, his face completely pale and devoid of its usual calm demeanor. Last chance to back out, Ren, Kale said, his voice dropping into an icy, dead serious register. Ging's theory sounds plausible on paper, but if your Nen nodes don't open under this shockwave, my thread aura will tear straight into your internal organs. Do it, Kale, I said, locking my eyes onto his. I didn't survive Meteor City, the troop, and Crollo Lucifer just to live out the rest of my life as a normal human. Blast it open. Kale didn't hesitate any longer. Swish. A violent, pitch-black storm of high-density thread aura erupted from Kale's body. He lunged forward, slamming his palm directly onto the center of my chest, driving a concentrated, sharp pulse of pure Nen straight through my skin and into my blocked spiritual channels. Forced reawakening, high-pressure shock. System input, concentrated black thread aura surge. Reaction, internal spiritual clog shattered under kinetic strain. Node status, 100% force opened. Boom. White hot, agonizing fire exploded through every single nerve in my body. It felt as if my blood vessels were being filled with liquid glass. I let out a choked, silent scream as the rusted iron gate locking my soul slammed open. And then, the river broke its dam. Woosh. A colossal, blinding torrent of golden-green aura burst from every single pore of my body, expanding in a massive, roaring shockwave that blew out the light fixtures in the training room and cracked the reinforced concrete floor. My specialist spirit didn't just return, it surged back with twice the volume, roaring through my channels like an unfettered, wild river. It worked. Kale gasped, shielding his face from the roaring wind of my aura, a massive smile breaking across his tired face. The river was just clogged. I dropped to my knees, panting heavily, looking down at my hands as the golden green light danced effortlessly across my fingers. My Nen was back. The gateway to Greed Island. 2 hours later, after catching my breath and packing our gear, Kale and I sat side by side in front of the bulky, customized Joystation console Jing had sent us. The metallic game card for Greed Island glinted under the room light. Remember Ging's note, Kale reminded me, slotting the card firmly into the console tray. Enjoy the training, but keep your eyes peeled for Pariston's influence in the association. Right, I nodded, placing my hands on the console's aura absorption pads. Let's go see what Jing built. We pushed our aura into the pads simultaneously. Z. A soft hum of high-frequency Nen filled the room as our vision dissolved into a blinding warp of white light. The physical world vanished, replaced by the dizzying sensation of being pulled through space at light speed. Reconnecting with the creators. Flop. My boots hit smooth, cool marble. The blinding light faded, revealing the towering starting chamber lit by magical sconces. Standing on the pedestal in front of us wasn't just Elena, she was joined by her twin sister Ita. Along with Dwan, who was holding a messy stack of game designs, and the towering, imposing silhouette of Razor standing near the back archway with his arms crossed. Elena looked up from her console screen, froze, and then her professional composure instantly shattered into a wide grin as her eyes landed on both of us. Well, look who finally decided to show up. Elena teased, leaning over the pedestal. The legendary 1987 beta testers. Jing messaged us that you guys ran into the Phantom Troop, Ita giggled, folding her arms. We heard Ren lost his Nen, but honestly, knowing what you two survived during system testing back in 87, we knew you'd pull through. Dwan scratched his messy hair, adjusting his glasses as he burst out laughing, pointing right at me. Man, especially you, Ren. Back in 1987 when we were calibrating the spell card mechanics and environmental damage caps, Jing used you as his unpaid living punching bag every single afternoon. I still remember him testing high-tier offensive cards on you without giving you a single Jenny. I twitched, a vein almost popping on my forehead as the painful, unpaid memories returned. Yeah, thanks for reminding me, Dwan. 6 whole months of getting blasted by spell prototypes, getting 0 pay, and being told it was, for the sake of game balance. Kale let out a soft chuckle beside me, tapping his silver cane against the floor. Hey, at least as the assistant tester I was running the diagnostic data while you were taking the direct blasts. From the back of the room, Razor let out a deep, booming chuckle, stepping forward with an approving nod toward both of us. Good to see you both back on your feet, Razor said, looking closely at my surging aura. Your channels look wider than ever, Ren. Getting blasted by Jing back in 87 clearly paid off in the long run. Step 1, the Wild Plains. Elena cleared her throat, tossing us our metallic rings with a bright smile. All right, former beta testers, Elena said playfully. You know the drill, put on your rings and say, book. Book, Kale and I called out together. Flash. The heavy, leather-bound card binders materialized in midair in front of us, floating smoothly before opening to reveal their numbered card slots. The game is fully operational now, so no cheating just because you tested the beta, Razor warned with a sharp, toothy grin. Head out through the archway into the plains. Take your time, rebuild your stats, and get back to peak shape. We stepped through the archway, feeling the fresh, warm ocean breeze hit our faces. The air on Greed Island was thick with natural, rich nen, a perfect, isolated training ground away from the prying eyes of the Hunter Association and the underworld. So, Kale said with a dry smirk as we walked down the dirt path into the rolling green hills. Where do we start? Unpaid punching bag. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath of the crisp air, a confident, sharp grin breaking across my face as I looked toward the distant mountain ranges. Jing owes me 6 months of back pay, I said, my golden green specialist aura humming smoothly around my knuckles. We master this game's mechanics, rebuild my output, and then we create a Hatsu that Crollo Lucilfa can never touch. Chapter 93 Summary and Status. Location, Greed Island. Reunion, reunited with game creators. Timeline correction, Greed Island beta testing officially occurred in 1987. Beta tester roles. Both Ren and Kale were 1987 beta testers. Ren was the official unpaid living punching bag. Current task. Begin island training regimen and develop an unstoppable Hatsu. Chapter 94, The Flow of the River. Date, January 14, 1989. Location, the Rocky Canyon region, Greed Island. The icy mountain wind howled through the narrow gorge, carrying with it a bitter, bone-chilling frost. It was mid-January 1989. 9 long, exhausting months had passed since Kale and I entered Greed Island, and 5 months since that brief, cryptic satellite call with Jing Free CSS. 5 months of tearing my nen down to its bare, foundational roots. I had practiced everything, snapping my aura from full output to instantaneous, absolute zetsu, shifting my Ru in razor-thin percentage shifts between my limbs, coating weapons with dense shu, and pushing my end to a crisp 15-meter radius. My physical output was monstrous, higher even than before Meteor City. And yet, every single attempt to manifest a new Hatsu ended in the exact same wall. The unforgiving barrier. Boom. My fist, heavily coated in a concentrated sphere of Ko, slammed into the granite cliff face. The rock shattered instantly, sending grey dust and jagged stones cascading down into the gorge. It was a strike capable of crushing a high-rank monster card in a single blow. But the moment I tried to transition that impact into a specialist technique, to give the river a shape, a condition, or a direction, the golden green light flickered violently and evaporated into thin air. Flicker, pop. Damn it, damn it. I slammed my forehead against the cold, cracked granite, my breath hitching as raw frustration burned in my chest. It makes no sense, Kale, I shouted over the roaring wind. My output is higher than ever. My Ten, Ren, and Gyo are flawless. I'm directing the flow just like Jing said, I'm not trying to freeze it or force it into a rigid mold. So why does the moment I try to turn it into an actual ability, the whole thing just collapses? The lesson of the unbroken stream. Kale sat wrapped in his heavy winter coat on a flat boulder nearby, his silver cane resting across his lap. He had watched me spend 16 hours a day running through this exact same exhausting loop. Ren, Kale said softly, his voice cutting through the whistling gale. Look at your hands. I looked down. My knuckles were bloody, calloused, and trembling from pure spiritual fatigue. When Jing told you that you can't carve a river, but you can direct its flow. Kale leaned forward, his dark eyes locking onto mine with quiet intensity. Did you ever stop to think that you're still the one trying to choose where the river goes? I froze, the biting wind suddenly feeling deathly still against my skin. You're building canals, Ren, Kale continued gently. You're telling the aura, flow here, act like this, turn into a weapon. But a river doesn't care where the engineer wants it to go. It only flows along the path of natural resistance. He stood up, the ferrule of his cane clicking softly against the frozen ground. You survived Meteor City, and you broke the seal on your nodes. But deep down, your mind is still treating your aura like something you have to control before someone steals it again. You aren't letting the river flow, you're trying to force it to run uphill. The breakthrough. I stared at my palms in silence. All these months, I had been terrified of having an empty vessel. Every time I summoned my aura, I was subconsciously trying to construct an armor, a definitive, solid hatsu to prove to myself that Crollo Lucifer hadn't permanently broken me. I was directing the river because I was afraid of where it would go if I let go of the reins. I closed my eyes. I took a deep, steady breath, letting the icy mountain air fill my lungs, and completely relaxed my posture. I stopped trying to shape the aura. I stopped trying to build a blade, a barrier, or an empathic copy. I simply let my specialist spirit rise naturally, completely unprompted by conditions or intent. WOOSH. Instead of flickering or violently bucking, the golden green aura flared smoothly, expanding around me like a deep, serene pool of warm water. The twin post-mortem spiritual resonances within my soul didn't resist, they harmonized, flowing in a quiet, unbroken rhythm through my channels. A faint, knowing smile broke across Kale's face as he watched the aura settle into an absolute, effortless equilibrium. There it is, Kale murmured, leaning on his cane. You don't need to construct a weapon, Ren. The river was never broken. You just had to stop fighting the current.
Chapter 95, The Bet and the Mirror. Date, January 21, 1989. Location, the Valley of the Beginning, Greed Island. 1 week after the breakthrough in the canyon, the morning air was crisp and remarkably clear. For 7 straight days, I hadn't thrown a single punch or attempted to mold my aura into a weapon. Instead, I spent every hour practicing total balance, aligning the physical rhythm of my body with the mental quiet of my spirit, letting my golden green specialist aura rest around me like a perfectly still, glass-like lake. No tension, no forcing, just absolute harmony between mind, body, and soul. Kale and I were sitting near the stone ruins of the starting plaza when the warp spell portal suddenly flared to life with a brilliant, blinding flash of light. Swoosh. The light faded, revealing a scruffy, unkempt man in a faded turban and worn traveler's gear. But it wasn't just him. Secured tightly against his chest in a makeshift cloth sling was a tiny bundle of blankets, and popping out from the top was a tuft of spiky black hair and a pair of wide, curiously bright brown eyes. Jing Freecss had arrived, and he was holding a baby. The unspoken bet. My jaw dropped. Kale nearly dropped his silver cane, blinking in absolute disbelief. Is that? Kale stammered, pointing a trembling finger at the bundle. Jing, is that a baby? Yeah, Jing said offhandedly, scratching his scruffy beard as if he had just carried a sack of potatoes across the island instead of a human life. This is Gon. Gon, born on May 5, 1987. In the real-world timeline of Hunter x Hunter, I knew every detail of this moment before it even happened. I knew the story, I knew the fate, and I knew exactly why Jing was standing here today. Jing walked over, shifting the weight of the tiny, bubbling infant in his arms, and locked his sharp, dark eyes onto Kale and me. A small, knowing smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. Yo, kids, Jing said, his tone casual yet laced with that familiar, frustrating weight. You remember our bet, right? I swallowed hard, stepping forward. Yeah, I remember. Back in 1987, during those grueling 6 months of beta testing when Jing was using me as his unpaid punching bag, we had made an informal wager. I had looked Jing dead in the eye and bet him that if he ever had a child, within 3 years, he wouldn't be able to stay put, he would end up leaving his very own flesh and blood with someone else. Of course I bet that, I thought secretly to myself, a bitter, hidden smile touching my thoughts. I bet on it because I already knew the original story. I knew the timeline. Well, kid, Jing said softly, glancing down at the tiny baby grasping at his thumb. You win the bet. I'm leaving him with someone. The real reason. Even though I knew the plot, seeing it unfold right in front of my eyes made something heavy settle in my chest. Looking at the tiny, innocent child who would one day shake the world, I couldn't stop myself. "Why, Jing?" I asked softly, my voice cutting through the quiet valley wind. "Why leave him?" Jing looked up from Gon, his expression hardening into a rare, serious stillness. "Because the life I live isn't a life for a kid," Jing said bluntly. "Ancient ruins, political assassin squads, rogue hunters, unknown continent expeditions, it's unsafe." My mother tried to talk sense into me, but in the end, Mito took legal custody after I tried leaving him with my grandmother. Mito's going to raise him right, in Whale Island, away from all of this. Jing paused, looking back down at the baby, his eyes softening just a fraction. "But above all that, I believe in him. I believe in my very own flesh. One day, if he wants to find me, he'll grow strong enough to come look for me himself." Recognition. His words hung in the mountain breeze, hitting me like a physical shockwave. I believe in my very own flesh. In that single, quiet moment, a sudden, overwhelming realization washed over me. I took a step back, my boots crunching softly on the gravel. All these months, I had been treating my lost Nen like an external weapon, a magic trick stolen by Crollo Lucifer that I had to force back into existence through sheer desperation. But my aura wasn't a tool given by someone else. It was me. It was my own life, my own spirit, my own flesh. By fearing its loss, I had been doubting my own existence. The moment I stopped fighting the current and trusted my own soul, just like Jing trusted his son, the river had finally aligned. I looked at Jing, then at Kale, letting out a long, deep breath. "Thanks, Jing," I said quietly, a genuine, relaxed smile finally settling on my face. "Thanks, Kale." Without another word, I turned on my heel, stepping away from the plaza and heading toward the quiet tree line to let my mind process the absolute clarity that had just settled into my soul. Behind the veil. After I walked out of earshot, Kale leaned on his cane, watching my retreating back as my golden green aura hummed in flawless, effortless balance around my distant figure. "Did the kid finally recognize it?" Kale asked softly, turning his gaze toward the legendary hunter. Jing watched me walk away, a faint, rare grin spreading across his rugged face. "Yeah," Jing chuckled, shifting baby Gon in his arms. "His learning curve isn't talent, it's recognition." It never felt like he was learning Nen for the first time. It felt like he was just remembering something he already knew. Jing reached into his pocket, pulling out a glowing, pristine spell card wrapped in a metallic developer crest, the prize for losing our wager. He tossed it lightly to Kale, who caught it effortlessly between two fingers. "A bet's a bet," Jing said, turning back toward the starting pedestal as the warp aura began to swirl around him and his son. "That's one of the special developer cards. Use it wisely." With a sudden, blinding flash of light, Jing Free CSS and baby Gon vanished from Greed Island, leaving behind only the quiet ocean breeze, a priceless developer card, and a hunter who had finally remembered who he truly was. Card. Chapter 96, The 7 Anchors of Hope. Date, January 28, 1989. Location, the secluded isolation cave, Greed Island. Before the blinding white warp light swallowed Jing and baby Gon, the legendary hunter had paused, casting a sideways glance toward my retreating figure, then back to Kale. "You know, Kale," Jing had chuckled, adjusting the cloth sling holding his son. "Ren's a way better gambler than you are." Kale had offered a quiet, rare smile, resting his hands on his silver cane. "Yeah, I know." Swoosh. Breaking the fourth wall of the mind. Deep within the silent, cavernous expanse of a secluded mountain cave, far from the rest of the island's players, I sat in total cross-legged meditation. The air was stone cold, but surrounding my body was a glowing, perfectly tranquil sphere of golden green specialist aura. No flickering, no bucking. I finally recognize it, I thought, closing my eyes as the truth resonated through every fiber of my being. A hatsu is not just a clever set of rules or a combat trick. A hatsu is the absolute, unadulterated expression of one's soul. When I first arrived in this world, I had subconsciously treated everything like a spectator, viewing this realm like it was just a story printed on manga pages or animated on a screen behind glass. Because I saw it as a fictional world, I built my techniques from an outsider's perspective, trying to construct abilities based on what looked effective, rather than what truly anchored me. My 9 aura pathways had no singular anchor because I wasn't an outsider anymore. This was my reality. And I wasn't alone in my spirit. Synchronized seamlessly within my soul were 2 post-mortem spiritual resonances, the enduring legacies of 2 lives that had passed into mine. Because these 2 spirits were fully synchronized in total harmony with my own will, my nen didn't require self-destructive vows or harsh, life-threatening restrictions to achieve absolute power. Sitting in the quiet dark, I realized the core truth behind the people who had shaped my journey. 1. My own core, my original, fundamental desire has never been conquest, it is to protect. 2. Kale's spirit, his thread hatsu was never born from guilt, it is the unwavering spirit to carry on. 3. Thomas's spirit, his legacy was never about surrendering to tragic circumstances, it is the relentless spirit to keep going. 4. Sister Elena's spirit, her devotion was never stubborn blind faith, it was an act of absolute, devoted kindness, regardless of how cruel the world proved to be. 5. Ging's mind, Jing is not blindly ignorant, he is calculated, precise, and an absolute believer in human potential. 6. My true soul, what I have always sought, above all else, is hope. To protect, to carry on, to keep going, to believe. To devote, to hope that, no matter how long or brutal the path may be, everything will be fine at the end of the road. The awakening, the sacred wayfarer. With absolute mental clarity, my golden green specialist aura flared, expanding to fill the entire cavern. The 6 core emotional anchors synthesized with the Nen system, forging a perfectly balanced, flawless harmony of defense, offense, space control, ranged utility, autonomous support, and peak transcendence. Main Hatsu, The Sacred Wayfarer. Category, Specialist. Engine, Dual Postmortem Aura Synchronization. 1. Enhancement, to protect, Aegis of the faithful. Role, Ultimate defense. Mechanism, a dense, golden layer of ultra-hardened aura coats my body and designated allies. Fueled by the desire to shield others, it dynamically thickens in direct proportion to an enemy's lethal intent, creating an impenetrable barrier capable of stopping high-impact physical and Nen attacks cold. 2. Transmutation, to carry on, thread of unbroken will. Role, offense and mobility. Mechanism, transmutes my aura into unbreakable, ribbon-like tendrils with dual elastic and steel-like properties. They slice cleanly through enemy armor in close combat and can latch onto surfaces to physically pull me forward across the battlefield at extreme, blinding speeds. 3. Conjuration, to keep going, sanctuary waypoint. Role, space control and support. Mechanism, creates localized door markers on any flat surface, opening portals to a conjured pocket dimension called the resting horizon. This peaceful, Safe space is used for instant travel, strategic retreats, storing critical supplies, and treating wounded allies completely away from battle. 4. Omission. To believe, beacon of the unwavering. Role, range defense and utility. Mechanism. Fires radiant, homing star-shaped projectiles that detonate with massive kinetic energy upon impact. When launched skyward, the beacon illuminates hidden traps, reveals invisible Nen constructs, and boosts overall team morale. 5. Manipulation. To devote, soul vanguard. Role, autonomous guardians and bodyguards. Mechanism. Manifests 2 fully autonomous armor constructs made of pure aura, representing the 2 spirits powering my post-mortem engine. One acts as an aggressive frontline attacker while the other intercepts incoming hits. Because they run on the post-mortem engine, they require 0 mental focus or manual commands from me. 6. Specialization. To hope, at the end of the road. Role, perfect balance catalyst, peak state. Mechanism. Fuses all 5 basic Nen categories into total, absolute equilibrium during critical situations. My physical wounds rapidly heal, my Nen reserves continuously replenish, and my overall combat output, speed, defense, and portal speed, doubles. Sub-ability, the Broom of the Wrath Angel. Alongside the main system, I forged a brutal, direct sub-technique inspired by Sister Elena's simple sweeping broom, re-engineered for pure heavy offense. SUB ability, The Broom of the Wrath Angel. Category, Conjuration plus Enhancement. Function, pure heavy offense, brute force. Mechanism, conjures a solid, heavy-duty broom made of dense metallic fibers, immediately flooded with a massive amount of shu. And raw enhancement via the dual post-mortem engine. Hits with the shattering force of a giant war hammer. Techniques. 1. The Great Sweep. A massive horizontal swing that releases a huge kinetic wave, literally. Sweeping away enemy defenses, heavy projectiles, and the surrounding terrain. 2. Downward Crush. A 2-handed overhead slam concentrating the entire engine's enhancement into the tip, causing a ground-shattering impact that crushes high-level Ken defenses. A Soul Reborn. I opened my eyes. The roaring wind in the cavern ceased instantly. The golden-green light surrounding me settled smoothly into my skin, humming with a calm, immense power that felt as natural as breathing. I held out my right hand. Clang. With a heavy metallic ring, a solid broom made of dense, gleaming metallic fibers materialized in my grip. I flooded it with shu, and the air around the weapon distorted under the sheer pressure of raw enhancement. I swung it in a gentle test movement. WOOSH. The displacement of compressed air alone tore a 10-foot trench into the cavern floor. I smiled, not with desperation, nor with the fear of a thief in the night, but with total, quiet confidence. Crollo Lucifer had taken my first ability. But in doing so, he had forced me to tear down a fragile, borrowed house and build an unshakable fortress in its place. I stood up, letting the conjured broom disperse back into aura, and walked out into the bright sunlight where Kale was waiting. Chapter 96 Summary and Status. Date, Location, January 28, 1989, Isolation Cave, Creed Island. Recognition. Ren accepts this world as reality and synthesizes his true soul anchors. Main Hatsu, the Sacred Wayfarer. Sub-ability, the Broom of the Wrath Angel. Current status, fully restored, transcended specialist state. Chapter 97, Testing the Horizon. Date, February 3, 1989. Location, the southern coast, Greed Island. The air along the southern cliffs was sharp and clean, carrying the salty tang of the open ocean. Ocean waves crashed against the jagged black rocks below, sending plumes of sea spray 40 feet into the air. I stood on the edge of the overlook, taking a deep, quiet breath. For the first time in nearly a year, my aura didn't feel like a leak I was frantically trying to plug, nor did it feel like a weapon I was desperately trying to forge. It was just me. My dual post-mortem engine, my memories of another world, the true secret of my soul. No one else needs to know, I thought quietly, keeping those sacred truths locked deep inside my heart. To the rest of the world, I'm just a hunter who found his true way. You've been standing there staring at the water for 20 minutes, Kale said, his boots crunching on the loose shale as he walked up behind me, leaning lightly on his silver cane. Are you going to test out the new ability, or are we just admiring the scenery? A faint, sharp grin tugged at the corner of my mouth. Let me show you, I said softly. Phase 1, the vanguard and the thread. I closed my eyes and let my specialist spirit rise. No forced incantations, no self-destructive restrictions, just pure, effortless alignment. WOOSH. A brilliant, golden-green aura burst around my body, expanding with the steady, heavy roar of a calm ocean tide. Soul Vanguard, I murmured. Flare. From the shimmering aura behind me, 2 towering, distinct figures materialized into existence. They weren't shadowy puppets or mindless constructs, they were fully articulated, knightly armor constructs made of hardened, condensed aura. The left construct, broad-shouldered and carrying a massive heater shield, immediately stepped in front of Kale and me, raising its defense. The right construct, sleek and carrying twin ethereal blades, dropped into a low, lethal vanguard stance, its eyes glowing with a sharp, vigilant light. Kale raised an eyebrow, taking a step closer to inspect the heavy plating of the defensive construct. Zero mental strain on your part. They're moving completely on their own. Zero, I replied, keeping the secret of the twin synchronized post-mortem souls strictly to myself. They run on pure autonomous intent. They react to incoming threats automatically, so I don't have to waste a single second of focus in combat. Before the dust could even settle, I flicked my wrist toward a massive, 50-foot granite spire protruding from the cliffside. Thread of unbroken will. SWISH swish swish. A dozen ribbon-like tendrils of gleaming golden aura shot from my fingertips. Half of them hardened into razor-sharp, steel-like bands, cleanly shearing through the base of the granite spire like a hot knife through butter. The remaining threads instantly softened into hyper-elastic tendrils, latching onto the top half of the falling monolith. With a simple flex of my arm, the elastic threads retracted violently. Boom! I was launched across the 200-foot gap at blinding, extreme speed, landing effortlessly on the far cliff face before the sheared rock even hit the ocean below. Phase 2, the Sanctuary and the Wrath. Kale tapped his cane against the ground, a low whistle escaping his lips across the ravine. Impressive speed. What about space control? I turned toward the flat rock face beside me, pressing my palm against the cool stone. Sanctuary waypoint. A glowing, geometric door marker etched itself into the rock face with a quiet hum. With a soft click, the solid granite swung open like a heavy oak door, revealing a warm, sunlit hallway leading into a vast, peaceful pocket dimension, the resting horizon. The air wafting out from the portal smelled of fresh lavender and warm pine, carrying an immediate, soothing pressure. A conjured pocket dimension for instant travel, retreats, and medical treatment, I called back as the door closed smoothly, sealing the rock face back into solid stone. And when subtle tactics aren't enough? Kale asked with a smirk. I let out a low chuckle, holding out my right hand. Clang! With a heavy, metallic ringing sound that echoed down the coast, the broom of the Wrath Angel materialized in my grip. The heavy-duty metallic fibers gleamed under the afternoon sun, instantly heavy-loaded with a staggering volume of shu and raw enhancement aura. I took a wide, grounded stance, sweeping the metallic broom horizontally across the empty air. The Great Sweep. WOSH boom. A colossal, crescent-shaped shockwave of compressed kinetic force burst from the broom's tip, detonating across the surface of the ocean. A 300-foot wall of seawater was instantly blasted backward, splitting the tide cleanly down to the seabed and shattering the nearby rock outcroppings into fine sand. The ocean literally recoiled from the strike. A new horizon. I lowered the heavy metallic broom, letting it disperse into soft, glowing particles of green light. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of the ocean slowly filling the massive trench I had just carved into the water. Kale stood near the edge of the cliff, adjusting his coat as he looked at the sheer destruction on the water, then back at me. Crollo Lucifer stole your ability, Kale said quietly, his dark eyes brimming with absolute confidence. But whatever you unlocked during these 9 months, it's terrifying. I didn't forge this out of anger, I replied, looking down at my hands, feeling the steady, unbroken river of my aura pulsing in complete harmony. I forged it to protect what matters. I turned back toward the trail leading toward Macedora, my boots firmly set on the dirt path. We've tested the system, I said, a calm, unshakable grin spreading across my face. Now it's time to clear this game. Chapter 97 Summary and Status. Date, location, February 3, 1989, Southern Coast, Greed Island. Field test, flawless execution of The Sacred Wayfarer and Broom of the Wrath Angel. Secrets kept. Dual post-mortem engine and isekai origin remain 100% secret. Results: autonomous defense, extreme mobility, dimensional access, and cataclysmic physical output fully verified. Chapter 98, The Divine Weapon and the Whispering Giants. Date, February 3, 1989. Location, the coastal trail to Macedora, Greed Island. For the first time since my nen was stolen, the suffocating weight in my chest was completely gone. I didn't need to hide my aura anymore. I didn't need to mask my presence, play the victim, or act like a broken specialist picking up the shattered pieces of a stolen Hatsu. I walked down the dirt path with my hands tucked lazily behind my head, letting my golden-green aura hum softly around my shoulders, open, bright, and completely unbothered. Kale walked a pace behind me, his silver cane tapping rhythmically against the dirt. But after a solid 10 minutes of silence, he couldn't hold it in any longer. Ren, Kale called out, rubbing the bridge of his nose with a look of utter, baffled exasperation. Yeah, I turned around, grinning. I understand the dimensional portals. I understand the autonomous armor constructs. I even understand the spatial threads, Kale said, stopping in his tracks and gesturing wildly with his cane toward the cratered coast behind us. But a broom, of all the legendary, terrifying weapons in the world you could have conjured to channel that mountain of enhancement aura, a warhammer, a broadsword, a divine spear, you chose a domestic sweeping tool. I burst into a fit of laughter, my voice echoing across the coastal cliffs. Why a broom? I wheezed, wiping a tear from my eye. Because it's the ultimate divine weapon. Go ask Sister Elena if you don't believe me. You know how many times she chased us around the St. Jude courtyard with that thing whenever Thomas and I snuck out. That wooden broom has more absolute authority than a chairman's license. Ha ha ha. Cale stared at me for 3 long seconds, completely speechless, before shaking his head in sheer disbelief. You are utterly insane. Hey, it sweeps away trash. I laughed, turning back toward the trail and jogging ahead toward the Macedora border. And right now, this world's got plenty of trash that needs sweeping. Behind the Wayfarer's back. What I didn't know was that Jing hadn't left Greed Island immediately after warping away with Baby gone. Before using his developer access to return to the real world, Jing had doubled back to the coastal ridge, joining Cale under the shade of a massive mahogany tree to watch my field test from a distance. As I jogged far ahead toward the horizon, the 2 men stood side by side in the shadows, watching the faint, golden-green aura trail I left behind. Jing took a quiet drag from a crumpled cigarette, blowing a thin stream of smoke into the sea breeze. His sharp, dark eyes were narrowed, reflecting the lingering kinetic distortion over the ocean. That kid, Jing spoke softly, his usual casual demeanor entirely replaced by a rare, serious edge. He didn't just rebuild his Nen. He bypassed the entire fundamental flaw of specialist abilities. Cale leaned heavily on his cane, looking down at the massive trench carved into the seafloor. What do you mean? Most specialists are glass cannons or utility junkies, Jing grunted, flicking an ash onto the grass. They trade raw combat efficiency for weird, complex conditions. When Crollo Lucifer stole his original Hatsu, he thought he left Ren with nothing because Ren was relying on borrowed concepts. Jing pointed a scruffy finger toward my distant figure. Look at his balance now, Jing continued, completely unaware of the hidden dual post-mortem engine or my reincarnated soul, seeing only the unbelievable mastery on display. He's using specialization not as a gimmick, but as an axis, a core that unifies enhancement, transmutation, conjuration, emission, and manipulation into a flawless, perfectly balanced set. His physical output, speed, defense, and space control are all operating at a seamless 100% equilibrium. Cale let out a soft, proud sigh. The sacred wayfarer. Yeah, Jing muttered, a rare, genuine grin spreading across his face. It's an unhackable system. You can't steal a Hatsu like that. To steal the sacred wayfarer, you'd have to steal his entire soul, his resolve, his memories, and his absolute conviction. It's rooted so deep in who he is that it's completely immune to theft. Jing turned his back to the coast, pulling the blanket sling tighter against his chest as Baby Gon let out a soft, sleepy yawn. What about that broom technique? Cale asked, a slight smirk playing on his lips. Jing chuckled, shaking his head as the warp spell began to glow beneath his boots. That great sweep, hit with the raw kinetic force of a high-tier enhances Ko, but wrapped in a conjured vector. If Crollo or the Phantom Troop ever stand in front of that kid expecting a helpless specialist who lost his Nen. Jing paused, looking over his shoulder one last time before the white light swallowed him whole. They're going to get swept right into the ocean. Chapter 98 Summary and Status. Date, location, February 3, 1989, Coastal Trail to Macedora, Greed Island. The joke, Ren reveals the broom is inspired by Sister Elena's authority. Secret kept, dual post-mortem engine and isekai origin remain completely unknown to Jing, Cale. The assessment, Jing and Cale admire Ren's impossible specialist balance and unstealable Hatsu. Current goal, head to Macedora to begin game clearing operations. Chapter 99, The Gates of Macedora and the Card Collectors. Date, February 5, 1989. Location, outskirts of Macedora, Greed Island. The high-walled, yellow brick city of Macedora shimmered under the afternoon heat. Known as the City of Magic, it was the trade capital of Greed Island, the place where players congregated to buy spell cards, trade info, and nurse their wounds after getting beaten up by the local fauna. I strolled through the towering arched gateway, taking in the bustling stone streets. Street vendors hawked rare items, and groups of mid-level players huddled in corners, whispering obsessively over their binder cards. "Look at you," Kale muttered, trailing a pace behind me with his cane tucked under his arm. "Walking into the biggest target zone on the island like you own the place. You know how many players here track new arrivals using Trace or Seek?" "Let M track," I said with a light laugh, buying 2 grilled meat skewers from a roadside cart and tossing one over to him. "If anyone tries to steal cards off us, they'll just save us the trouble of hunting him down." Before Kale could reply, 3 men stepped out from a narrow alleyway ahead, effectively blocking the path. Their leader, a tall guy wearing leather armor with a notched short sword at his hip, let out a low whistle as he checked his glowing Greed Island ring. Well, no Garen spell on him, no high-tier defensive cards equipped, and walking around completely wide open, the leader sneered, resting his hand on his sword hilt. "Hey kid, hand over your binder and all your defensive spells, and we might let you walk back to the starter planes without breaking your legs." Kale stopped, leaning on his cane with a tired sigh. "I swear, these bandits get dumber every year." "Hold on, Kale," I said, taking a slow bite of my meat skewer. "Let me handle this nicely first." I took a step forward, looking at the 3 bandits with a polite smile. "Guys, I'm having a really good day. My nen is working, the weather is nice, and I'm on my way to get a spell card set. How about you turn around, go grab a coffee, and pretend you didn't see us?" The leader barked out a laugh, drawing his short sword. "Kid, you think this is a joke? Gain." A card burst into light in his hand, conjuring a heavy wooden net laced with sticky nen. "Take him down." The leader threw the net straight at my chest, while his 2 cronies lunged from the left and right with iron daggers, their blades coated in a thin layer of shoe. I didn't move an inch. I didn't even drop my meat skewer. Woosh. Without a single word or physical gesture from me, the space beside me shifted. A towering, golden armored figure, the defensive construct of Soul Vanguard, materialized out of thin air. Raising its massive, aura-forged heater shield, it stepped cleanly in front of the sticky net. Boom! The net detonated against the shield's surface, its nen instantly dissipating into harmless sparks. Before the leader could even process what had happened, the second, sleeker Vanguard construct flickered into existence right behind the 2 cronies. With 2 effortless backhand sweeps of its heavy gauntlets, it sent both bandits flying 50 feet down the alleyway, crashing through a stack of wooden crates in a shower of splintered oak. What the hell? The leader stumbled backward, his face draining of all color as he stared at the 2 massive, knightly constructs towering over him. "A specialist? No, what kind of Hatsu is that?" I stepped around my Vanguard Guardian, taking another bite of my skewer as I stopped right in front of the terrified bandit leader. "Like I said," I whispered, my golden green aura flaring just enough to make the air around us feel heavy, "it's a good day. Now, how about you give me your spell cards instead?" 5 seconds later, the leader was running down the street screaming at the top of his lungs, leaving his binder and 3 rare movement cards sitting in a neat pile on the cobblestones. Kale walked up, nudging the dropped cards with the tip of his cane. You call that handling it nicely? I let him keep his pants, didn't I? I grinned, sweeping the cards into my collection before turning toward the central spell shop. Come on, let's go buy some leave and return cards. We've got a game to win. Chapter 100, The Secret Card and Season 2 Finale. Date, June 18, 1989. Location, Starting Plaza, Greed Island, Right Pointing Arrow, Hunter Association Headquarters. 4 months had passed since we entered Macedora. 4 months of testing our strength, stocking up our card albums, and enjoying the absolute peace of an island far removed from the dark underworld of Meteor City and the Phantom Troop. Standing under the archway of the starting plaza where our journey on Greed Island had begun, I adjusted the strap of my travel bag. I think my time here is enough, I said, looking out toward the rolling green hills one last time. My output is double what it used to be, my mind is clear, and the sacred wayfarer is second nature now. There's nothing left for us to gain by staying in the sandbox. Cale leaned heavily on his silver cane, a soft, approving nod accompanying his usual calm demeanor. Agreed, staying any longer would just be hiding. It's time to head back. Before walking up to the exit portal, I reached deep into my inner coat pocket and pulled out the pristine, metallic card Jiang had tossed to Cale after losing our bet back in January. It didn't look like any normal Greed Island card. It didn't have a restricted slot number or a standard spell name. The card was forged from a strange, iridescent silver metal that shimmered with a faint, pulsing developer-level aura. Across the front, written in Ging's messy, sharp handwriting, were 3 words. Developer Special Card. Creator, Jiang FreeCSS. Type, Developer Overwrite, System Bypass. Status, UNUSED. Note, for the kid who won the bet, don't waste it on small stuff. I still wonder what this actually does, I muttered, flipping the cool, metallic card between my fingers. A system overwrite, an instant warp to anywhere in the world, or maybe a direct line to Ging's personal frequency. Knowing Jiang, it's probably something completely absurd that will break the rules when we need it most, Cale chuckled, tapping the edge of the card with his cane. Keep it hidden, that's our ultimate wild card. I slipped the architect's key back into my pocket, holding up my ring. Leave. WOOSH. A blinding column of light wrapped around Cale and me, lifting us off the marble floor of Greed Island and shooting us into the sky at light speed. MID 1989, return to headquarters. Flop. The sensation of weightlessness vanished, replaced by the familiar, cold scent of polished marble and air-conditioned air. We materialized inside the central transport bay of Hunter Association headquarters. Sunlight poured through the massive floor-to-ceiling glass windows overlooking the bustling city below. Hunters walking through the concourse stopped in their tracks, turning their heads as they sensed the overwhelming, tranquil aura humming off my shoulders. 9 months ago, I had walked onto Greed Island as a broken specialist who had lost his nen to Crollo Lucifer. Now, I stood in the heart of HQ as the sacred wayfarer, a hunter who had transcended his own limits and rebuilt an unshakable fortress within his soul. Welcome back, gentlemen, a sharp, professional voice called out. Walking down the grand staircase was a senior association official, holding a confidential dossier sealed with the chairman's official stamp. Chairman Netero has been monitoring your progress, the official said, stopping in front of us and offering a crisp bow. The underworld has been quiet, but the Phantom Troop's shadows are moving again in the east. and Pariston Hill's faction in the association has been making subtle moves while you were away. I looked out the massive glass window toward the distant horizon, a calm, razor-sharp smile settling onto my face as my golden-green aura flickered softly around my knuckles. Let them move, I said quietly, the heavy wooden broom of the Wrath Angel whispering faintly in my soul's reservoir. We're ready for all of them. End of SEASON 2, THE Reawakening. Timeline, MID 1989. Ren's age, 16 years old. Location, Hunter Association Headquarters. Ren's status, fully restored, transcended specialist state. Special item, developer card secured in inventory. Next chapter, Season 3, The Shadow of the Troop and Association Politics. I stood in the sunlit hall of Association Headquarters at 16 years old, carrying the sacred wayfarer, the architect's key in my coat pocket, and an unshakable resolve. Season 2 is wrapped up.